Hello, Night Seekers. Welcome to Nytheric Horror. Tonight, enjoy 3 hours of true, scary stories, mysterious encounters, and disturbing experiences. Ads may play during the first 15 minutes and after 2:30 sounded, with no mid-roll ads in between. I was 9 years old when my parents bought the split-entry house, where I spent most of my childhood. This was in 1997, in a quiet neighborhood outside Halifax, Nova Scotia, where nearly every street had the same combination of low brick houses, sloping lawns, chain-link fences, and cars that disappeared beneath salt every winter. If you drove past our house, you would never have noticed it. It was built sometime in the early 70s. The front was covered in dark red brick on the lower half and cream-colored siding above. There was a single-car driveway on the left, a patch of lawn on the right, and 3 concrete steps leading to a small, covered entrance. When you opened the front door, you did not enter directly into a room. You stepped onto a square landing. From there, 7 carpeted steps went upward, and 7 went down. Upstairs was where we spent most of our time. At the top of the steps, the living room and kitchen were to the left. The living room faced the street and had a large picture window. Behind it was a dining area, and behind that was the kitchen overlooking the backyard. To the right of the stairs was a long hallway. The bathroom was the first door on the left. My sister's bedroom was across from it. My parents' room came next. My bedroom was directly at the far end of the hallway. If my bedroom door was open, I could lie in bed and look straight down the hall toward the top of the stairs. That detail became important very quickly. The basement was partly finished. If you went down from the front landing, you entered a short lower hallway. The laundry and furnace room were on the left. A storage room and small bathroom were farther down. To the right was a large family room. That room had a strange layout. The entire right side faced the backyard and had 3 wide windows with a glass door leading outside. The windows were ground level because the backyard sloped downward behind the house. Along the left wall was a built-in desk almost 12 feet long. It had drawers underneath, shelves above, and a space in the middle where my father eventually put our computer. Straight ahead from the entrance was a couch facing an old television. The television sat perpendicular to the desk. If you were sitting at the computer, the television was behind and slightly to your right. That mattered later, too. The basement had plenty of windows, yet somehow it always felt darker than the upstairs. I cannot explain why. Even during the afternoon, when sunlight came through the rear windows, the corners seemed dim. The fake wood paneling absorbed light. The ceiling was low. The brown carpet was probably 20 years old. Everything downstairs seemed quieter than it should have been. But none of us thought the house was frightening when we moved in. Actually, we loved it. We had spent the previous 2 years renting a cramped duplex, and this was the first house my parents had ever owned. My sister, Emma, was 6. I was 9. For us, the place felt enormous. We argued over bedrooms before the moving truck was even empty. Emma wanted the room at the end of the hall because it was slightly larger, but I claimed it first. I was older, and apparently that was enough of a legal argument for my father. My parents bought the house from a man named Stephen Mercer. Stephen was probably in his late 40s at the time. The house had belonged to his mother, Margaret, who had died earlier that year. We knew that much before buying it. She had not died inside the house. My parents specifically asked because my mother was uncomfortable with the idea of someone dying in a home we were buying. According to Stephen, his mother had passed away in a hospital after a short illness. She had lived in the house for more than 25 years. She had raised 3 children there. After her husband died, she stayed by herself for almost another decade. By the time her health declined, Stephen and his siblings had tried to convince her to move into a smaller apartment. She refused. She loved the house. That was how Stephen described it. My mother remembered him saying, "Mom always said she'd leave that place feet first." Then he laughed awkwardly and corrected himself because she technically had not. At the time, that story meant nothing to us. We were buying a house. People die. People sell their parents' homes. There was nothing mysterious about it. My family's emotional situation was already complicated enough without adding ghosts. About 8 months before we bought the house, my mother had lost a baby. She was 5 months pregnant. I had known she was pregnant. Emma had known too. We had started calling the baby Peanut because my parents refused to tell us whether it was a boy or a girl. Then something went wrong. At 9 years old, I did not understand the details. I only knew my father woke me at my grandmother's house one morning and told me the baby was gone. My mother stayed in the hospital for 2 days. When she came home, the house we were renting changed. Not physically. Emotionally, there was a room that had been intended for the baby. My mother could not walk past it without becoming quiet. My father dismantled the crib and stored it in the basement. My mother packed away the baby clothes friends had given her. Nobody talked about Peanut. That was what adults did in my family when something hurt too much. They stopped using its name. Buying the new house was partly an attempt to start over. My father never said that directly, but I understood it years later. My mother wanted a place that had no empty nursery, no hospital paperwork on the kitchen counter, no neighbors asking how she was feeling. She wanted somewhere new. So we moved in July. For the first month, nothing happened that I would call supernatural. There were normal house sounds. Pipes knocked. The basement door stuck during humid weather. The upstairs hallway creaked near the bathroom. The furnace made a metallic banging noise when it started. My father spent most weekends fixing small problems left behind by the previous owner. I was more interested in riding my bike around the neighborhood. The first time I saw the woman was near the end of August. It happened sometime after midnight. I know that because my parents had let me stay awake to watch a movie, and I remember the digital clock beside my bed showing something after 12 when I finally turned off my lamp. I slept with my bedroom door open. I had always done that. I was not afraid of the dark exactly, but I liked seeing the hallway light. My parents kept a small plug-in nightlight near the bathroom, so Emma could find it without turning on the ceiling light. That night I woke suddenly. Nothing had made a sound. I was simply awake. I opened my eyes and looked toward the doorway. An old woman was standing there. There was no moment where I wondered whether it was my mother. I knew immediately that it wasn't. The woman looked to be in her late 60s or early 70s. She was not transparent. She was not glowing. She did not look dead. She looked like a normal, elderly woman who had walked into the hallway in the middle of the night. She wore a pale blue nightgown beneath a cream-colored housecoat. The housecoat had tiny, dark flowers printed across it. Her hair was short and gray, slightly flattened on one side as if she had recently been sleeping. Her hands were held together at her waist. There was one thing about her clothing that I noticed immediately and remembered for years. The left pocket of her housecoat was turned inside out. The white lining hung against her hip like a small cloth triangle. I could not see her feet clearly because the hallway was dark. She stood just outside my room, not inside. She wasn't looking directly at me. Her head was tilted slightly, and her expression looked calm, almost thoughtful. The most frightening thing was how ordinary she appeared. If she had been floating or covered in blood, my mind would have immediately classified her as something impossible. Instead, my first thought was that an old woman had somehow entered our house. I sat up. She remained there. I wanted to call for my father. No sound came out. The woman lifted her head slightly. For a moment, I thought she was going to speak. Instead, she looked past me toward the window, then back toward the bed. She stood there for several more seconds. I blinked. She was gone. I do not mean she faded. One moment, she occupied the doorway. The next, it was empty. I turned on my lamp. I screamed for my father. He came running from his room in his underwear, carrying a baseball bat. My mother followed. What happened? Someone was here. My father checked the hall. He checked the bathroom. He checked Emma's room. Then he searched downstairs. The doors were locked. The windows were closed. Nobody was inside. My parents assumed I had been dreaming. I accepted that explanation. I wanted it to be true. My mother sat beside me until I calmed down. Then she asked what the person looked like. I told her it was an old woman. My mother became strangely still. What kind of old woman? I described the nightgown and housecoat. She listened. Then my father said he was asleep. Carol? My mother nodded. Neither of them mentioned it again. The next morning, I felt embarrassed. In daylight, the experience seemed obviously dreamlike. I had probably woken halfway out of a nightmare. Maybe my mother had checked on me earlier and my sleeping brain changed her appearance. That explanation worked for about 2 weeks. Then I saw the woman again. Same doorway, same time of night, same clothing. This time, I did not scream. I woke and saw her standing there. My heart started beating so hard that I could feel it in my throat. I pulled the blanket up to my chin. She watched me. Again, she did not look threatening. But when you are 9 years old, a strange woman standing silently outside your bedroom at 1 a.m. does not need to look threatening. Her existence is enough. I whispered, "Mom?" The woman did not respond. I knew she wasn't Mom. I asked, "Who are you?" Nothing. She turned her head toward the hallway. Then she stepped backward. I saw one full step. That was when I noticed something else. She moved normally, but I heard no floorboard creak. That hallway creaked if a cat walked through it. She made no sound. She moved one step backward, then another. By the time she reached the shadow near my parents' bedroom, I could no longer see her. I remained awake until sunrise. I did not tell my parents. I was afraid my father would think I was making it up. I was more afraid my mother would believe me. That probably sounds strange, but even as a child, I understood there was a difference between an adult telling you that you imagined something and an adult taking it seriously. If Mom believed me, then the woman might be real. I preferred being wrong. For the next few months, I saw her occasionally. Never every night. Never according to any obvious pattern. Sometimes 2 weeks passed. Sometimes more than a month. She always appeared in or near my doorway. She never entered my bedroom. That became one of the strangest parts. There seemed to be an invisible boundary at the threshold. She might stand directly against it. She might turn and look down the hall. Once she leaned slightly into the room as though checking something. But neither foot ever crossed the doorway. I did not know then that my mother was seeing her too. Mom's first sighting happened in the kitchen. Years later, she told me the story. She had gotten up around 5 a.m. because she could not sleep. Grief had left her with insomnia after the miscarriage. She went into the kitchen to make tea. While standing at the counter, she saw an elderly woman walk from the dining area toward the hallway. Mom thought it was our neighbor, Mrs. Wallace. That made no sense, but that was apparently the first identity her brain supplied. She turned. The woman was gone. Mom checked the front door. Locked. She walked down the hallway. Everyone was asleep. She told herself she was tired. Then, 2 nights later, she woke because someone was standing beside Emma's bedroom door. My mother could see the hallway from her bed. The figure was partly blocked by the doorframe. Mom sat up. The woman turned toward her, then disappeared. My mother did not tell anyone. She was afraid she was having some kind of breakdown. After losing the baby, she had spent months worrying that she was not mentally healthy. Seeing people who were not there felt like confirmation of her worst fear. So both of us were seeing the same woman, and both of us kept quiet because we were afraid of what it meant. My sister started seeing her the following winter. Emma was 7 by then. One Saturday morning, she came into the kitchen while my mother was making pancakes. She said the grandma lady was in the hall again. My mother dropped the spatula. I was sitting at the table. I remember looking up immediately. "What grandma lady?" Mom asked. Emma shrugged. "The one who looks in the rooms." I felt cold. My mother stared at her. "What does she look like?" Emma described an old woman wearing sleeping clothes. I asked what color. Emma said blue. My mother looked at me. That was the moment she knew I had seen the woman, too. I could tell from her face. Neither of us wanted to say it in front of Emma. Mom asked, "Does she ever talk to you?" "No. Does she come inside your room?" Emma shook her head. "She just checks." That word stayed with us. Checks. That was exactly what the woman seemed to be doing. Checking bedrooms. Watching. Making sure people were there. My father still refused to believe any of it. When Mom finally told him, he blamed suggestion. He thought I had told Emma about my dreams. I hadn't. Then he suggested Mom's grief had influenced us. That did not make much sense either. Emma barely understood the miscarriage by then. She was not frightened of the woman. Actually, Emma seemed to like her. That bothered me more than anything. One afternoon, I asked if she was scared. "No, why not?" "She smiles." I had never seen the woman smile. "At you?" Emma nodded. "What does she do?" "Nothing." "Does she touch you?" "No." "Does she say anything?" "No." "Then how do you know she's nice?" Emma looked annoyed. The question seemed stupid to her. "Because she is." I stopped asking. For me, the sightings remained frightening. Maybe because I was older. Maybe because I understood more clearly that dead women should not stand in bedroom doorways. There was also something about her attention that bothered me. She watched me longer than she watched anyone else. That may simply be because my room was at the end of the hallway. But as a child, I became convinced she was especially interested in me. Sometimes I would wake before seeing her and know she was there. The room would not become cold. There was no smell, no noise. I simply developed a strange awareness of the doorway. I could keep my eyes shut and feel that someone stood outside. Eventually, curiosity would win. I would look. There she was. The turned-out pocket became the detail I focused on. It was always the same. Cream housecoat, blue nightgown, gray hair, left pocket pulled inside out. I began wondering why. Had the cloth gotten caught on something? Had she died wearing it like that? Had she reached for something inside the pocket? My child's brain created explanations. One night I decided that if she appeared again, I would speak to her. I practiced what I would say. "Are you dead?" That seemed too rude. "Do you live here?" That seemed better. She appeared 3 nights later. I woke and saw her. I remembered my plan. Every word disappeared. She stood with one shoulder against the doorway. I stared. She looked at me. For the first time, she raised one hand, not waving. She placed 2 fingers against the wooden doorframe, then tapped it twice. Tap, tap, the sound was quiet, but real. I heard it. Then she looked toward my closet. My closet door was closed. I followed her gaze. When I looked back, she was gone. I turned on the light. Nothing. The next morning, I examined the doorframe. There were 2 small marks in the varnish. They looked like old dents. I could not prove they had not already been there. But afterward, I noticed the woman touched the house frequently. She would run her fingers along the hallway wall, rest one hand on a doorframe, touch the banister. Once my mother saw her standing in the kitchen with her palm against a cabinet. It was as though she knew the building physically, not simply the rooms, the actual wood, the walls, the surfaces. That later made sense. At the time, it felt unsettling. I stopped seeing her when I was around 11, not because she disappeared, because I began closing my bedroom door. I remember the first night clearly. She had appeared 2 nights in a row. I was exhausted from staying awake after each sighting. So, before bed, I closed the door. That sounds like an obvious solution. For some reason, I had been afraid to try it. Part of me worried she might open it. She didn't. I slept through the night. The next night, I closed it again. Nothing happened. After a week, I became convinced the doorway mattered. If the door was closed, she did not enter. I never saw her standing inside my room. I never woke to find the door open. That should have made me feel safe. Instead, something else started. Sound changed around me. The first few times happened upstairs. I would be lying in bed reading while music played quietly from a radio on my dresser. Suddenly, the sound would distort. Not static. Not interference. Imagine someone walks between you and a speaker. For a fraction of a second, the person's body blocks part of the sound. The volume changes. The higher frequencies disappear. Then, everything returns when they move past. That was what happened. Except nobody was there. The radio would be playing normally. Then the sound would soften and shift as though a person crossed directly between me and the speaker. Sometimes it happened once, sometimes twice in succession. I tested the radio, moved it, changed stations. Nothing was wrong. Eventually, the same thing happened with the television downstairs. That became far worse. By the time I was 12, my father had bought a used computer from someone at work. He put it on the long, built-in desk in the basement family room. The computer was primitive by today's standards. A bulky, beige monitor. Dial-up modem. Windows 95. A keyboard that made loud plastic clicks. I loved it. I spent hours playing games, typing nonsense, and later connecting to the internet. But I hated being in the basement alone. There was no single reason. It simply felt empty. Too empty. If nobody else was downstairs, the silence became so complete I could hear the computer fan. So I kept the television on. The television sat behind and to my right. That way the room had noise. If I turned in my chair, I could see the couch and screen. If I looked left, I saw the entrance to the lower hallway. Behind me was open carpet. Beyond that were the windows and backyard door. The first sound distortion happened while I was playing a computer game. The television was showing a hockey game. I was not watching. I only wanted the noise. Someone walked behind me. That is exactly what I experienced. I did not see anything. But the television sound changed from my right side, became briefly muffled directly behind my head, then returned. It was the acoustic effect of a person passing between me and the television. I assumed it was my father. Dad? No answer. I turned. The basement was empty. I called upstairs. Mom answered from the kitchen. Dad was outside. Emma was at a friend's house. I stared at the space behind my chair. Nothing. I told myself the announcer's voice had simply changed. Maybe the television signal had glitched. I returned to the computer. 20 minutes later, it happened again. This time more slowly. The sound became muffled on my right, moved behind me, then cleared on my left, like someone walking directly behind the chair from one side of the room to the other. I spun around halfway through. Nothing. The distortion stopped immediately. That frightened me more than seeing the woman ever had. A visible ghost was at least something my mind could focus on. The sound distortion gave me nothing. No face, no body, no location I could stare at. It only told me that something occupied space behind me. After that, I began turning around constantly. I would play on the computer for 10 minutes. Check behind me. Another 5 minutes. Check again. The more attention I gave it, the less often it happened. Just like the woman upstairs, it seemed easiest to notice when I was not expecting it. That became a pattern for years. If I was alone in the basement with the television on, the sound occasionally changed as though someone walked behind me. It never happened when another person was sitting there. Never when my father was at the workbench. Never when Emma was watching television. Only when I was alone. Once I tried to prove it. I placed a portable cassette recorder on the desk and recorded the room while I used the computer. The distortion happened once. I felt it clearly. I stopped the tape and rewound it. On the recording, nothing changed. The television remained normal. That disturbed me. Whatever I experienced affected what reached my ears, but apparently not what reached the microphone. I repeated the experiment several times. Nothing. Then one afternoon, I used headphones. The television was still on, but I could barely hear it. I was listening to a CD through the computer. Halfway through a song, the sound changed, inside the headphones. The right side became muffled, then both, then the left. The exact sensation of something moving from right to left behind me. I ripped the headphones off. The room was empty. That was the moment I stopped believing it was simply acoustics. Something was interacting with my perception of sound, or with me. I ran upstairs. My mother was folding laundry in the living room. I told her. She did not laugh. Instead, she said, "That's how I know she's near sometimes." I stared at her. What? Mom explained that after I started closing my door. She had continued seeing the older woman. Not often, mostly in the hallway. But sometimes Mom did not see her. She heard the house change around her. The television became muffled. The refrigerator motor sounded distant. A conversation from another room seemed briefly covered. Exactly what I had experienced. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because you were scared enough." That made me angry. I accused her of keeping things from me. She reminded me that she was the parent and did not have to share every frightening thought. I stormed to my room. Teenage logic. Later that evening, she knocked. She said, "I don't think she wants to hurt us." "You don't know that." "No, then why say it?" Mom sat on the edge of my bed, because I've been afraid of a lot of things since losing the baby. We almost never talked about that. I stopped being angry. She continued, "I know what fear feels like. This doesn't feel the same." I asked what it felt like. She thought for a while, like someone's checking the locks. That was almost exactly what Emma had said years earlier. Checking, I still did not find that reassuring. The first incident that made my father question his skepticism happened that winter. It was January. A major snowstorm had hit overnight. School was canceled. Dad was outside clearing the driveway. Mom was in the kitchen. Emma and I were downstairs arguing over the computer. I got angry and went upstairs. Maybe 10 minutes later, my mother heard a loud bang from the basement. She shouted for Emma. No response. Then the woman appeared in the kitchen. Mom saw her clearly, not from the corner of her eye, not for half a second. She was standing near the top of the basement stairs. The old woman looked at Mom. Then she pointed downward. Mom said her expression was different from usual. Urgent, My mother dropped what she was holding and ran. Emma had slipped from the arm of the couch while trying to reach a shelf. She had hit her head on the corner of the coffee table and was lying on the floor dazed. She was conscious. She needed 6 stitches. She was not seriously injured. But Mom told Dad what had happened. He did not know what to say. He tried to claim Mom must have heard Emma fall first. Mom insisted she saw the woman before hearing anything from downstairs. Dad said stress did strange things. Mom said, fine. That was the end of the argument. After Emma's accident, my mother became openly grateful toward the woman. I hated that. Calling her a ghost was frightening enough. Treating her like part of the household seemed worse. Mom never spoke to her directly. At least, not that I knew then. But she stopped pretending nothing happened. If the hallway creaked at night, Mom might say, she's walking again. If something went missing and turned up somewhere strange, she would joke that Margaret had borrowed it. We still did not know the woman's name. Margaret came later. At that time, she was simply the lady. My father refused to use even that. He called everything the house. The house settles. The house echoes. The house has drafts. The house is old. For Dad, the building itself became responsible for everything because buildings did not require belief. Then, he experienced the bedroom doors. One night, Dad was home alone. Mom had taken Emma and me to visit my grandparents. He went to bed around 11. Sometime after midnight, he woke because he heard one of the bedroom doors close. He assumed a draft. Then, another door closed. Then another. There were only 3 bedrooms. Dad got out of bed. All 3 doors were shut. He knew ours had been open. He opened Emma's room. Empty. Mine empty. Then he went downstairs. Every exterior door was locked. He checked the windows. Nothing. When Mom asked whether anything strange had happened, Dad said no. Years later, he admitted that was the first night he slept with the hallway light on. The protective nature of the woman became clearer as we got older. She never frightened us deliberately. She never screamed, never appeared bloody, never stood over the bed, never touched us while we slept. If doors were closed, she respected them. If we asked for privacy, she seemed to give it. That does not mean living with her felt comfortable. I think people imagine a friendly ghost would be charming. It isn't. Imagine knowing a dead stranger occasionally walks through your home. Imagine brushing your teeth and seeing someone pass behind you in the hallway. Imagine hearing the acoustic shape of a human body crossing a room when you know you are alone. Intent matters, but so does reality. Even a kind dead person is still a dead person. The strongest evidence that something physical was happening came when I was 14. My parents went out for dinner. Emma was sleeping at a friend's house. I was allowed to stay home alone. That was a big deal to me. I ordered pizza, rented 2 movies, and planned to spend the entire evening downstairs. By then I was used to the basement. The sound distortion still happened, but less often. I was halfway through the second movie when the television audio shifted. Someone passed behind me. I ignored it. A minute later, it happened again. I said, "Not tonight." That was the first time I had ever addressed the presence directly. The room became quiet. The television was still playing, but the sound seemed farther away. I looked behind me. Empty, then the basement door leading to the backyard rattled. Not violently. The handle moved once. I froze. That was different. The ghost had never touched exterior doors while I was awake. I stood. The handle moved again. Someone was outside. I turned off the television. Through the glass panel beside the door, I could see darkness. Snow covered the backyard. The porch light was off. I did not approach. Then I heard a man's voice. "Hello?" My heart stopped. Not a ghost, a real person. Hello? Is somebody there? I backed toward the stairs. The man tried the door. Locked, I ran upstairs and called my father at the restaurant. While I was on the phone, the front door handle moved. The man had walked around the house. Dad told me to call 911. I did. The dispatcher kept me on the line. Then I heard something upstairs in the hallway. A bedroom door closing. My room. Then Emma's. Then my parents. One after another. The same pattern Dad had heard. The front door shook. The man outside cursed. I was terrified. Then the porch light turned on. I had not touched the switch. The man froze. Through the frosted glass beside the door, I saw his silhouette. He stepped backward. The upstairs hallway creaked. A woman's figure appeared at the top of the stairs behind me. I saw her reflection in the glass before I turned. Blue nightgown, cream housecoat, gray hair, the left pocket hanging inside out. She looked past me toward the door. The man outside suddenly ran. Police arrived several minutes later. They found footprints around the house. The man had walked through the backyard, tried the basement door, then circled to the front. They followed the tracks to the street. They did not catch him that night. A neighbor later reported someone had tried to enter his garage. The police suspected a drunk or someone looking for a house to burglarize. My father came home furious and frightened. He checked every lock. Then he asked why the porch light was on. I told him. Dad said nothing. He walked to the switch. It was in the on position. I had been downstairs when the light came on. Nobody else was inside. That was the night Dad stopped making jokes about the house. He still did not say ghost, but he stopped correcting us. The physical evidence lasted until morning. Footprints remained in the snow around both entrances. The scratches from the stranger trying the basement door were visible near the lock. More strangely, there were 4 clean finger-shaped streaks in the frost on the inside of the front glass panel, exactly where I had seen the woman's reflection standing behind me. The marks were too high to belong to Emma. My mother's fingers were shorter. Dad photographed them. By noon, sunlight melted the frost. The photograph remained. For me, that incident changed the haunting. I was still afraid of the woman. But I began to understand what Emma meant when she said the lady was nice. She watched doors. She watched rooms. She watched children. That did not answer why she was still there. It only suggested purpose. The following spring, my mother found the first clue to her identity. She was gardening beside the rear fence when an elderly neighbor named Mrs. Patterson came over. Mrs. Patterson had lived on the street since the houses were built. She had known the previous owner. Mom mentioned that we occasionally found small things left behind in odd places. She did not mention ghosts. Mrs. Patterson laughed and said Margaret never threw anything away. My mother asked about her. Mrs. Patterson described Margaret Mercer. Widowed, 3 children. Worked part-time at a bakery. Loved gardening. Stayed in the house after her children moved out. Then Mrs. Patterson said something that caught Mom's attention. She was forever checking on those kids at night. Mom asked what she meant. Mrs. Patterson smiled. She worried. Every noise, she'd get up in that old robe and walk down the hall, checking bedroom doors. My mother stopped gardening. She asked what the robe looked like. Mrs. Patterson did not remember. That evening, Mom told us. Dad said nothing. I asked whether there were photographs. We did not have any. The sale had been handled through Stephen and a realtor. My parents had met him only twice. Mom considered calling. Dad thought that would be inappropriate. "What are you going to say?" he asked. "Hi, we bought your mother's house and think she's walking around in her pajamas?" Mom agreed. So, we did nothing. By then, the sightings had become less frequent. Emma still occasionally saw the woman near her bedroom. Mom sometimes saw her in the kitchen. I almost never saw her anymore because I kept my door closed. The sound distortion, however, became more common. It happened downstairs at least once or twice a month. Sometimes the television sound shifted. Sometimes the computer's speakers. Once I was talking to a friend on the telephone while sitting at the desk. His voice changed in my ear as if someone walked between us. That made no physical sense. He was miles away. The effect traveled through the telephone receiver. I asked him to repeat himself. He said nothing had changed on his end. Another time, I was wearing a portable CD player with headphones. Same thing. Right side muffled. Center. Left. Something crossed behind me. I stopped turning around. That sounds brave. It wasn't. I learned that looking never helped. If Margaret wanted me to see her, I would. If not, I would only stare at an empty room and become more frightened. At 15, I began bringing friends home after school. I never told them about the ghost. I did not want to become the kid with the haunted house. One friend, Jason, noticed the basement on his own. We were using the computer when he suddenly looked behind us. What? He shrugged. Thought your mom walked by. My mother was at work. I did not tell him. Another friend refused to sleep in the basement after hearing someone move near the windows. He assumed it was my father. Dad had been upstairs all night. Most people experienced nothing. That was another reason I believed the haunting was real. If we had been constantly telling visitors stories, suggestion could explain a lot. But people noticed things before we told them. The most disturbing sound incident happened when I was 16. I was alone in the house during a summer afternoon. Bright sunlight, windows open, lawn mower running somewhere nearby. Nothing about the environment was frightening. I was downstairs at the computer. The television was off. I had a small radio playing on the desk. I was typing an email when the music changed. The sound did not simply become muffled. It stretched. The singer's voice lowered slightly in pitch. The drums slowed. For maybe 2 seconds, the entire song seemed to pass through thick material. Then it returned. I stopped typing. The radio continued normally. I looked behind me. Nothing. Then the same distortion happened to the lawnmower outside. That was impossible. The mower sound came through the open windows behind me. It bent the same way. The music and lawnmower distorted together. Whatever passed behind me was not interfering with electronics. It was interfering with sound itself. I stood. The room became very quiet. Not silent. Wrong. The refrigerator upstairs was running. Birds were outside. A car passed on the street, but everything sounded farther away. Then I heard footsteps, soft, directly behind me. One step, then another. I turned. For the first time since childhood, I saw Margaret clearly. She was standing near the built-in desk, not upstairs, not near a bedroom, in the basement. She looked exactly as I remembered. Blue nightgown, cream housecoat, pocket inside out. But something about her expression was different. She was looking toward the laundry room, not at me. Her face was tense. I followed her gaze. The laundry room door was partly open. I had left it closed. I heard a faint electrical buzzing. Then I smelled hot plastic. Margaret moved toward me. I backed away. She raised one hand. For the first time, she entered my personal space. I felt pressure against my chest. Not a shove exactly. A firm push. I stumbled backward. Stop. I do not know why I said it. She pushed again. Harder, my chair rolled behind my knees. I nearly fell. I became frightened and angry. What do you want? She pointed toward the stairs. Then the laundry room made a sharp popping sound. Smoke rolled through the doorway. I ran upstairs. I called 911. Then I went outside. Within minutes, smoke was pouring from the basement windows. The fire department arrived quickly. An electrical connection near the dryer had overheated inside the wall. The fire was contained mostly to the laundry room, but firefighters told my parents it could have spread fast through the basement ceiling. If I had remained downstairs trying to investigate the smell myself, I would have been directly beside the wall when it ignited. My father asked how I had noticed the fire. I told him Margaret warned me. He did not argue. There was physical evidence from that encounter, too. When I changed my shirt later, I found 4 pale pressure marks across my chest. Not bruises, more like red fingerprints, surrounded by areas where the skin had gone white. My mother saw them. They lasted until the following morning. The shirt itself had 2 wrinkles pressed into the fabric that refused to flatten even after washing. I kept that shirt for years. The fire damaged part of the basement. For several weeks, we could not use the family room. The built-in desk survived, but smoke stained the wall behind it. When repairs were finished, the room looked brighter. New paint, new flooring, better lights. For a while, I wondered whether the sound distortion would stop. It did not. The first evening I used the repaired basement, someone walked behind my chair. The television sound bent around an invisible body. This time, I smiled. Not because I suddenly loved being haunted. I still found it deeply unsettling. But I understood the pattern. She was moving through her house, or what had once been her house. That year, my mother finally contacted Stephen Mercer. The fire had damaged some old paperwork left in a storage cabinet, including an envelope addressed to his mother. Mom used that as an excuse to call. They spoke for almost half an hour. Mom did not immediately mention Margaret's ghost. She asked about the house, about his childhood, about his mother. Stephen said he and his 2 sisters had grown up there. His mother had been extremely protective. Their father worked nights for many years, so Margaret often handled the children alone. She slept lightly. If one child coughed, she checked. If a door moved, she checked. If she heard a car outside, she checked the windows. Stephen laughed while describing it. Then my mother asked what Margaret wore to bed. There was a long pause. Why? Mom said she was curious. Stephen described a blue nightgown. Then he said his mother had owned a cream housecoat with small navy flowers. My mother sat down. She asked whether there was anything unusual about the robe. Stephen laughed again. One pocket was torn. What do you mean? The lining always turned inside out. Mom kept saying she'd sew it, and never did. My mother started crying. Stephen asked what was wrong. So she told him. Not everything, just enough. She said we occasionally saw an older woman in the hallway. She described the clothing. She mentioned the pocket. Stephen stopped speaking for several seconds. Then he said, "That's Mom. No dramatic revelation, no secret murder, no curse. He simply knew." My mother asked whether Margaret had died in the house. No, at the hospital. Had anything terrible happened in the house? No. Had Margaret believed in ghosts? Apparently not. Had she ever said she wanted to remain there after death? Stephen laughed softly. She said she'd haunt us if we sold it. He had assumed she was joking. A week later, Stephen mailed my parents a photograph. It showed Margaret standing in the backyard sometime in the late 80s. She looked younger than the woman I had seen, but unmistakably the same person. Same face, same hair, same posture. She was wearing the cream housecoat. The left pocket was turned inside out. Emma looked at the photograph and said, "That's her." No hesitation. My father sat at the kitchen table staring at it for several minutes. Then he said something that surprised all of us. Well, at least she likes the place. That was Dad's surrender. He never admitted belief more clearly than that. After we knew her name, the haunting felt different. My mother occasionally said, "Good night, Margaret," when turning off the kitchen light. Emma talked to her once. I was horrified. She was 14 by then and less afraid of everything than I had been at that age. One evening, she saw Margaret near the bathroom and simply said, "Hi." Margaret stopped. Emma said the woman smiled, then disappeared. I asked why she would do that. Emma shrugged. Because ignoring her seems rude. That became a joke in our family. Polite haunting. But there were still moments that reminded us we were dealing with something impossible. Once my father dropped his wedding ring in the basement while moving furniture. We searched for an hour. Nothing. The next morning, the ring was sitting on the kitchen counter beside Mom's coffee cup. Dad had not put it there. Another time, my mother's car keys disappeared. She became frustrated and said, "Margaret, I really don't have time for this." A cabinet door opened. The keys were inside with the plates. Mom stared, then said, "Thank you." The cabinet closed by itself. She never told Dad about that one until years later. The house also seemed to react when family members were sick. If Emma had a fever, the hallway creaked more often. When Mom had surgery, Dad repeatedly heard footsteps between their bedroom and the bathroom while she recovered. Once I had a severe case of the flu and woke around 3 in the morning. My bedroom door was closed. I heard 2 taps on the frame. Tap, tap, the same sound Margaret had made years earlier. I did not open it. I whispered, "I'm okay." The hallway remained quiet. That was one of the few times I felt comfort instead of fear. By 17, I had almost accepted Margaret as part of the house. Then, something happened that reminded me she could physically intervene when she believed it was necessary. It was November. Freezing rain had been falling all afternoon. My parents were away at a Christmas party. Emma was working an evening shift at a restaurant. I was home alone. I had been downstairs using the computer. Around 10, the power flickered. The television shut off. The computer restarted. I swore and stood. Then the basement door leading to the backyard opened. Cold air rushed inside. I had locked it earlier. I crossed the room. The door was open maybe 6 inches. Rain blew through the gap. I closed it. The deadbolt worked. I assumed I had forgotten to lock it. I returned to the computer. 5 minutes later, the door opened again. This time, I heard the deadbolt move first. Metal sliding. Then the door opened. I stood slowly. There was no wind strong enough to turn a deadbolt. I walked toward it. Through the glass, I saw the backyard. Dark, wet, nothing else. The sound in the room distorted. Someone passed behind me. I turned. Margaret was standing between me and the stairs. That had never happened before. Usually she moved around the house. This time she blocked my exit. "What's wrong?" I felt stupid speaking aloud. Margaret looked toward the backyard door, then at me. The door opened farther. Something outside moved near the fence. I could not tell what. I stepped toward the door. Margaret moved in front of me. I stopped. "What?" She raised both hands. Her expression was not calm. She looked frightened. That frightened me more than anything I had seen in the house. I backed away. A loud crack came from outside. The large maple tree near the rear fence split. A section of trunk fell toward the house. I had maybe 1 second to understand what was happening. Margaret hit me. I mean, physically hit me. Both hands struck my chest. I went backward over the arm of the couch. At the same moment, a tree crashed through the basement windows. Glass exploded across the family room. Branches came through the wall of windows exactly where I had been walking. One heavy limb struck the floor less than 3 feet from the backyard door. If I had taken 2 more steps, it would have hit me. I landed hard. My head struck the carpet. For several seconds, I could not breathe. The room filled with freezing rain. I looked toward the stairs. Margaret was gone. My chest hurt. When I lifted my shirt, 2 red hand-shaped marks were visible below my collarbones. They remained for most of the next day. My father saw them. The insurance adjuster saw the broken windows, the damaged couch, the branches, and the position where I had fallen. Obviously, the tree was real. The storm was real. The supernatural explanation was not something we gave insurance. But Dad knew where I had been standing. He knew I should have been in the path of the tree. After repairs, he installed stronger windows. He also started saying goodnight to Margaret, never when he knew we could hear him. But I caught him once. He was turning off the hallway light. He looked toward the bedrooms. "Thanks," he said quietly. Then, he saw me. We never discussed it. The emotional side of the haunting changed my mother more than anyone. Years after the miscarriage, she finally began talking about the baby. We learned that she had known it was a girl. My parents had planned to name her Sarah. They had not told us because they thought it would make the loss harder. One evening, Mom and I sat in the living room looking through old photographs. She admitted that Margaret's presence had initially terrified her because she thought grief was making her hallucinate. Later, it became comforting. "She raised children here," Mom said. "Maybe she understands what it feels like to worry about them." I asked whether she thought Margaret had somehow replaced the baby in her mind. Mom looked offended. "No." Then she softened. "Nothing replaces anyone." That sentence stayed with me. Nothing replaces anyone. Not a new house, not another child, not a ghost. Grief changes shape, but the empty space remains its own thing. Mom said she believed Margaret helped her stop being afraid of loving the house. After losing Sarah, Mom had become terrified that happiness would somehow invite another loss. She did not say that to us at the time. She felt guilty whenever she enjoyed the new home. Margaret's presence somehow changed that. Here was evidence, at least to Mom, that a person could love a place and a family so deeply that some part of that care remained after death. I did not know whether I believed that interpretation. I still don't, but it helped her. That mattered. I moved away for university at 18. My first night in residence was strange. I closed my bedroom door automatically. Then I realized I no longer needed to. For years, I had associated an open door with seeing Margaret. I opened it. Nothing happened. I slept badly anyway. Every building has different sounds. Radiators, elevators, people walking. I missed the familiar creaks of our hallway. That surprised me. When I visited home, the haunting continued. Margaret never appeared in my doorway again because I still closed the door when sleeping. But occasionally I would hear the distortion downstairs. It became almost a greeting. I would be at the computer. The television sound would bend behind me. I would say, "Hi, Margaret." The sound returned to normal. Once I came home after a difficult semester. I had failed an exam and broken up with my girlfriend within the same week. At 20, those problems felt enormous. I sat alone in the basement, feeling sorry for myself. The television was on. The sound shifted. Right, behind me. Left. I did not turn around. Yeah, I said. "I'm fine." The sound distorted again, this time from left to right. I laughed. "Okay, I'm not fine." It stopped. Maybe I was talking to an empty room. Maybe the television simply sounded strange. By then, I no longer cared enough to prove it. My sister moved out 2 years later. Mom and Dad remained in the house. For a while, Margaret's activity decreased. That made sense, according to our family theory. No children to check, no teenagers downstairs, just two adults. Mom occasionally saw her near the kitchen. Dad heard footsteps, nothing dramatic. Then my parents decided to sell. They were getting older. The stairs bothered Mom's knees. Dad did not want to maintain the yard. They wanted a smaller bungalow. I was surprised by how emotional the decision made me. That house contained nearly every major memory of my adolescence. Christmas mornings, arguments, graduations, the miscarriage we had carried with us into it, Emma's stitches, the basement fire, the broken windows. Margaret, I had spent years wanting to escape the strange things in that house. Then the idea of losing the house felt like another death. Mom understood. Places aren't people, she told me. I laughed. You're the one who talks to a dead woman in your kitchen. That doesn't make the house a person. Fair point. The sale happened quickly. The buyer was a man named Andrew who had two young daughters. My mother noticed that immediately. She joked privately that Margaret would be pleased. Andrew viewed the house twice. The second time, he stayed much longer than expected. He walked through the bedrooms. He looked carefully at the basement. He stood near the built-in desk for several minutes. My parents assumed he was checking the renovation work. He made an offer the next day. During the final walkthrough, something happened that my parents did not tell me until later. Andrew was standing in the upstairs hallway. The house was almost empty. Beds gone, pictures removed, the rooms echoed. He looked toward my old bedroom at the end. Then he asked my mother, "Can I ask you something weird?" Mom said yes. Andrew hesitated. "Is this house haunted?" My mother did not lie. She said, "I think so." Dad apparently stared at her. Andrew did not seem surprised. Mom continued, "But if it is, it's an older woman. She's never hurt us. Actually, I think she's helped us." Andrew looked down the hallway again. He asked, "Previous owner?" Mom said probably. That was when Andrew told them why he asked. During his first viewing, he had been downstairs in the family room while the realtor spoke to my parents upstairs. He stood near the built-in desk. The television was gone by then. The room was empty. Andrew heard my mother speaking upstairs. Her voice suddenly changed. It became muffled on one side. Then passed behind him. Then cleared on the other. He thought someone had walked directly behind him. He turned. Nobody was there. Andrew said it happened twice. He did not mention it to the realtor because he assumed the empty room created a strange echo. Then, during the second viewing, he went upstairs alone. He reached the hallway. An older woman was standing in my bedroom doorway. Andrew assumed she was my grandmother. He smiled politely. She looked at him, then toward the two little girls following behind him. Andrew turned to make sure his daughters were not running. When he looked back, the woman was gone. He searched the bedrooms. Nobody. He asked the realtor who the older lady was. The realtor thought he was joking. That was why he asked my mother whether the house was haunted. My mother told him about Margaret. Not every story, just the basics. Previous owner. Raised her family there. Appeared in the hallway. Seemed protective. Andrew listened. Then he bought the house anyway. My parents moved out in October. Before leaving for the final time, Mom walked through every room. She reached the hallway and stopped. Dad was carrying the last box outside. Mom stood alone for a moment. Then she said, "Thank you for taking care of them." Nothing happened. She turned toward the stairs. Behind her, my old bedroom door closed softly. Mom did not reopen it. For several years, that was the end of the story. We occasionally joked about Margaret. At family gatherings, someone would mention the basement. Dad would pretend he still did not believe. Emma would remind him about the tree. He would change the subject. The old house belonged to somebody else. Life moved on. My mother died many years later. Not young, not suddenly. She had a stroke in her 70s and never fully recovered. I was with her near the end. So was Emma. Dad had died several years earlier. Mom was tired. She had lived a full life. Still, losing your mother does not become easy because you are an adult. During her last week, she drifted in and out of consciousness. One afternoon, she woke while I was sitting beside her. She looked toward the doorway of the hospital room. Her face changed. Not frightened. Surprised. Then she smiled. I asked what she saw. Mom said, "She's still wearing that ugly robe." My whole body went cold. Who? Mom looked at me like the answer was obvious. Margaret. I turned toward the doorway. Nobody was there. When I looked back, Mom had closed her eyes. She died 2 days later. For a long time, I did not tell Emma what she said. I wasn't sure I believed Mom truly saw anything. Medication, memory, the mind nearing death. There were plenty of explanations. A year after Mom died, I received a message online from someone I did not recognize. His name was Andrew Collins, the man who had bought our childhood house. I had almost forgotten his last name. He said he hoped it was not inappropriate to contact me. He still lived in the house. His daughters were adults now. He had remembered my mother's story about Margaret and wanted to ask me something. I called him. We spoke for nearly an hour. He had seen Margaret several times over the years. So had his daughters. Always the same. Blue nightgown. Cream floral housecoat. Gray hair. Inside out pocket. She mostly appeared in the hallway, once near the kitchen, never threatening. His younger daughter used to call her the bedtime lady. Andrew had also experienced the sound distortion in the basement. He described it perfectly without me explaining it first. The sound would become muffled, as though a body crossed behind him. Sometimes when he was wearing headphones. Sometimes when the room was otherwise empty. I asked why he contacted me after all those years. He became quiet. Then he said they were renovating the basement. The old built-in desk was still there. He had finally decided to remove it. When the contractors pulled the desk away from the wall, they found something behind it. An old envelope. It had apparently fallen into the narrow gap between the desk and paneling decades earlier. The envelope contained photographs. Most showed the Mercer family. Christmas, birthdays, children in the backyard. Margaret, younger. Her husband. Andrew contacted Stephen Mercer and returned most of them. One photograph was different. Stephen told him to keep it because he did not understand where it came from. Andrew asked for my email address. He scanned the photograph while we were still on the phone. A minute later, it appeared on my screen. The picture was old, probably early 80s. It showed the basement family room before my parents owned the house. The carpet was different. The television was different. But the layout was unmistakable. The wall-length desk was there. A young boy sat at it. According to Andrew, Stephen identified the boy as himself at around 12 years old. A television was on behind him. The photograph had apparently been taken from near the basement stairs. Margaret was visible in the picture. She stood behind Stephen's chair. Blue nightgown. Cream housecoat. One pocket inside out. Her hand rested lightly on the back of the chair. At first, I thought that was all Andrew wanted me to see. Then I noticed the date printed along the white border. 1982, Margaret was alive in 1982. Nothing impossible about the photograph. I told Andrew that. He said, "Look at the television." I enlarged the scan. The television screen reflected part of the room. The desk, the back windows, Stephen sitting in the chair, Margaret standing behind him, and another child standing beside Margaret, a little girl, maybe 4 years old. Nobody in the actual room occupied that position. I asked Andrew whether Stephen had a younger sister. He did, but she would have been 15 when the photograph was taken. The child in the reflection was much younger. I zoomed closer. The image quality was poor. The girl's face was indistinct. She appeared to be holding Margaret's hand. I felt sick without understanding why. Then I noticed her clothing. A small white sleeper. Across the chest was a faded yellow duck. My mother had bought the same sleeper while she was pregnant. I remembered it because Emma and I had argued about whether the duck looked stupid. After the miscarriage, Mom packed it away. Years later, she donated the baby clothes before we moved. There was no possible way Margaret Mercer could have owned that sleeper in 1982. There was no possible way a photograph taken 15 years before our family bought the house could contain a child dressed in it. I told Andrew it had to be something else. A reflection. Damage to the photograph. Another child wearing similar clothes. He did not argue. Before we ended the call, he told me one final thing. His oldest daughter had recently moved home with her newborn son while separating from her husband. The baby slept in my old bedroom at the end of the hall. 3 nights before Andrew contacted me, his daughter woke because the bedroom door was open. She distinctly remembered closing it. An old woman was standing in the doorway. She was not alone. A little girl in a white sleeper stood beside her. Andrew's daughter had never heard about my mother's miscarriage. She had never seen the photograph. She described the yellow duck before Andrew showed it to her. I asked what the 2 figures were doing. Andrew said Margaret was looking into the crib. The little girl was holding her hand. My parents bought the house in the summer of 2009 when I was 15 years old. It belonged to people they had known for years, a married couple named Robert and Elaine Carter. Robert had worked with my father before I was born, and the 2 families had stayed close even after Robert changed jobs. We had eaten dinner at their house a few times when I was younger, although I had never paid much attention to the building itself. Back then, it was simply the place where 2 of my parents' older friends lived. Elaine died after a long illness. She did not die inside the house. She spent her final weeks in a hospital and passed away there with Robert and their grown daughter beside her. I knew that because my mother had gone to visit her several times before the end. My father went too. I did not. That became something I felt guilty about later. Elaine had always been kind to me. When I was a child, she was the type of adult who remembered what snacks you liked and did not force conversation if you were shy. She gave me old electronics to take apart because she knew I liked that sort of thing. Once, when I was about 11, she gave me a broken cassette player and told me that if I managed to make it work, I could keep it. I never fixed it. For years afterward, it stayed in a box in my bedroom. When Elaine became sick, my mother asked if I wanted to visit her. I said no. Hospitals made me uncomfortable, and at 15 I was selfish in the ordinary way teenagers can be selfish. I told myself I did not know Elaine well enough for it to matter. Then she died. I remember feeling worse than I expected. A few months later, Robert decided the house was too large for him. His daughter lived in Alberta, and he wanted to move closer to her. My parents had been looking for a larger home anyway, and the price he offered them was much lower than anything similar in the area. That was how we ended up buying it. The house stood outside Thunder Bay, Ontario, on a wooded road about 20 minutes from the center of town. It was larger than most homes in the neighborhood because it had been built into a steep piece of land. From the front, it looked like a 3-story house, but from the backyard, you could see all 4 levels. The lowest floor was mostly garage and utility space. You could drive directly into a two-car garage at ground level. Behind the garage was a boiler room, a small workshop, and a storage area dug partly into the hillside. A set of narrow wooden stairs led upward from the garage to the main floor. The second level was where most daily life happened. There was a living room at the front, a dining room behind it, and a large kitchen at the back. A small bathroom sat beside the staircase. The kitchen had sliding doors that opened onto a raised wooden deck overlooking the backyard and trees. The third floor contained the bedrooms. My parents had the large front bedroom. There was a guest room beside it, then the main bathroom. My room occupied the back corner directly above the kitchen. At the end of the bedroom hallway was another door. Behind that door, a steep staircase went up to the fourth level, the attic. Calling it an attic makes it sound smaller than it was. The roof was steep enough that someone had converted most of the space into storage decades earlier. You could stand upright along the center. The walls sloped down on both sides. Bare floorboards ran almost the entire length of the house. There were two tiny windows, one facing the front and one facing the backyard. The attic extended directly above my bedroom. That fact mattered more than anything else about the layout. When we moved in, the attic contained boxes Robert did not want, old furniture, Christmas decorations, rolls of carpet, and pieces of equipment that had probably been there since the 70s. My father asked Robert whether we should throw everything away. Robert said yes. Then he changed his mind. There might be some of Elaine's things mixed in, he said. His face changed when he said her name. So my father left most of it alone. That attic remained cluttered for years. Nothing about the house frightened me when we first moved in. It felt old, but not creepy. The floors creaked. The plumbing was loud. The heating system made strange metallic noises when it started. You could hear someone walking 2 floors above you because the wooden framing carried vibration extremely well. That became the explanation for almost everything during our first year. If something clicked, it was the boiler. If a door moved, it was air pressure. If a light flickered, it was old wiring. And the wiring really was old. My mother complained constantly about it. Some rooms had modern switches. Others had switches that looked like they belonged in the 70s. There were outlets in strange places. One light in the garage could apparently be controlled from 3 different switches, and nobody understood why. The first unusual thing I remember happened about a month after we moved in. I came downstairs one night around 2 in the morning to get water. Everyone else was asleep. The living room radio was playing. It was a small, portable AM/FM radio my father kept on a shelf near the front window. It was not plugged into the wall. It ran on 4 large batteries because Dad occasionally carried it into the garage when he was working. The volume was low. I assumed my father had forgotten to turn it off. I walked over. The radio was not playing a station. It was producing soft static. I turned the knob until it clicked off. Then I went to the kitchen, got my water, and returned upstairs. By morning, I had forgotten about it. A week later, my father mentioned the radio at breakfast. "Who's been messing with my radio at night?" Nobody answered. My mother thought he meant me. I denied it. Dad said he had turned it off before bed and found it playing twice during the night. My younger sister, Anna, was 12 and immediately said the house had a ghost. Dad rolled his eyes. "It has bad batteries." Anna asked how bad batteries turned a radio on. Dad ignored her. That became a family joke for a while. Whenever something electronic behaved strangely, Anna blamed Elaine. My mother hated that. "Don't say that," she would tell her. Elaine wasn't like that. Like what exactly? She never explained. The first thing that genuinely bothered my father happened in the garage. He was alone in the house one Saturday morning. Mom was shopping. Anna was at a friend's place. I was working a weekend shift at a grocery store. Dad was downstairs replacing brake pads on our car. From the garage, he could hear the kitchen above him. The main kitchen floor was directly over the rear half of the garage ceiling. Dad heard someone walking across it, slowly from the staircase toward the refrigerator, then back. He assumed one of us had come home. He shouted my mother's name. No answer. The footsteps stopped. A minute later, they began again. Dad walked upstairs. The kitchen was empty. Every exterior door was locked. He searched the house because he thought there might be an intruder. Nobody, he checked outside. Nothing. When I got home, he asked if I'd come back during my shift. I said no. That was when he told us about the footsteps. My mother blamed the house. Old floors. Dad frowned. Old floors don't walk from the stairs to the fridge. That was the first time I remember him sounding genuinely confused. Still, none of us used the word haunted seriously. The house settled into our normal life. I finished high school. I started college classes locally and kept living at home. My girlfriend, Rachel, began spending more time there. Rachel and I had been together for about a year when the attic incident happened. I was 19. It was late autumn, probably October or early November. The weather had turned cold, but there was no snow yet. Rachel had come over on a Saturday afternoon. My parents were downstairs. Anna was out with friends. Rachel and I went to my room to watch something on my laptop. We ended up falling asleep. My bed was against the interior wall, almost directly beneath the attic staircase and the rear part of the attic floor. I do not know how long we slept. Maybe 40 minutes. Maybe an hour. We woke at exactly the same time. That is one of the details Rachel and I still agree about. There was no gradual waking. Both of us opened our eyes and sat up. A sound was coming from directly above the room. At first I thought someone had turned on a radio in the attic. It sounded like an old radio being tuned between stations, not normal white noise. There were changing tones inside it. A burst of static, then a faint piece of something that almost sounded like speech, then static again, then a high electronic whistle. It moved back and forth the way an analog radio sounds when you slowly turn the tuning dial. Rachel looked at me. What is that? I was still half asleep. I said, I don't know. The sound continued for maybe 10 seconds, then stopped. The attic became silent. Rachel and I stared at the ceiling. A few seconds later, something stepped onto the floorboards above us. One heavy footstep. Then another. Then another. The sound moved directly across the attic. I felt the vibration through the ceiling. Rachel sat fully upright. What the hell? I laughed because I was uncomfortable. Squirrels? She looked at me like I was stupid. Those are not squirrels. We get squirrels up there. We did. At least we had found evidence of them before. My father had discovered chewed insulation and droppings near one corner the previous winter. But even while I said it, I knew the sound was too heavy. The footsteps continued. Slow, deliberate, each one pressed enough weight onto the boards that I could hear wood bending. They crossed from the front of the attic toward the area directly above my bed. Then stopped. Rachel whispered, "Something is standing above us." I told her not to be dramatic. Then the floorboard above us creaked under sustained weight. Not a step. Pressure, as though someone had stopped with both feet planted there. I stared upward. The ceiling did not move. Rachel grabbed my arm. After maybe 15 seconds, the pressure lifted. The footsteps moved away, this time toward the attic stairs. 1, 2, 3, then nothing. Rachel wanted to leave the room. I told her it was probably an animal. She argued that no squirrel weighed enough to make those sounds. I said the attic floor amplified everything. We actually argued about it for several minutes because I was embarrassed by how scared I felt. The truth was, I did not want to go upstairs and check. If I really believed it was a squirrel, I would have grabbed a flashlight immediately. Instead, I stayed on the bed. Eventually, we went downstairs. My father was in the living room. I asked if he had been in the attic. No, I asked if Anna had come home. No. Rachel looked at me. Dad asked why. I told him we heard something. He shrugged, probably squirrels. Rachel gave me a look that said, "See, I used that as confirmation." For the rest of the afternoon, nothing happened. By evening, we were joking about it. Then came the bathroom incident. The bathroom I normally used was one floor below my bedroom, beside the main staircase near the living room. Around 8 or 9 that evening, Rachel and I were upstairs again. I needed to use the bathroom. She stayed in my room watching something on my laptop. I went downstairs. The small bathroom had a toilet on the left, a sink directly ahead, and the door behind you when you stood at the toilet. I closed the door. I had almost finished when I heard movement outside. Not footsteps, exactly. That is important. It sounded like someone walking slowly in socks while barely lifting their feet. A soft, dragging sound. Slide, pause, it came from the living room. Then moved toward the bathroom. I smiled immediately. Rachel and I used to scare each other constantly. She would hide around corners. I would wait behind doors. That kind of stupid thing. I assumed she had followed me downstairs and was sneaking toward the bathroom. The dragging sound stopped outside the door. I laughed. "Nice try." No answer. I waited. "Nothing," I said louder. "I heard you." Still nothing. I finished, washed my hands, and deliberately opened the door quickly while stepping forward. Got you. Nobody. The hallway was empty. The living room was empty. The kitchen lights were on. I looked behind the bathroom door. Nothing. I checked the staircase. Nobody. My body reacted before my brain did. Every hair on my arms rose. I felt a wave of cold across my shoulders. I ran upstairs. Rachel was still on my bed. She looked annoyed because I had interrupted the video. "Did you come downstairs?" "No, seriously, what?" "Did you come down and hide by the bathroom?" She laughed. "No." I waited for her to admit it. She didn't. I asked whether she heard me talking. She said no. That bothered me almost as much as the footsteps. I had spoken at normal volume. The bathroom was not far from the staircase. If Rachel had been standing in my bedroom doorway, she probably would have heard me. But she had heard nothing. I explained what happened. Her expression changed. "Same thing as upstairs." "No, how is that not the same thing?" "Because I heard socks." "Exactly, footsteps. I said it could have been the house." "Pipes." "The furnace." "Wind?" Rachel asked why wind would stop directly outside the bathroom door. I had no answer. For the first time that day, neither of us laughed. That night, she did not want to sleep over. I drove her home. On the way, she asked about Elaine. I had never told her much. I explained that the previous owner's wife had died before we bought the house. Rachel asked whether Elaine had lived there long. I said maybe 20 years. "Does your family think it's her?" "No, your sister does. Anna thinks everything is a ghost." Rachel looked out the window. Then she said those steps upstairs were a person. I told her she did not know that. She replied, "Neither do you." That conversation stayed in my head. A few nights later, I had another incident. This one is more difficult to defend because I had smoked marijuana. I am not hiding that. I was 20 and occasionally smoked with friends. It was late, probably somewhere between midnight and 2. My parents were asleep. Anna was asleep. I had come home hungry. I went downstairs to the kitchen. I did not turn on the kitchen ceiling light because it was painfully bright at night. Instead, I switched on the living room lamp. That gave enough light to see the kitchen without waking anyone. I made 2 sandwiches and stood at the counter eating. Nothing strange happened. When I finished, I washed the plate, turned off the living room lamp, and went to the small bathroom. After using the toilet, I started upstairs. Halfway up, I noticed light behind me. I turned. The living room lamp was on. I stopped on the stairs. I knew I had switched it off. The switch was an old wall switch beside the entrance to the room. Not a touch lamp, not a remote. I walked back down. The lamp itself was connected to an outlet controlled by that switch. I pressed the switch. The light went off. I stood there for several seconds. Nothing. I went upstairs quickly. Yes, I was stoned. That gave me an explanation. Maybe I had only thought I turned it off. Maybe I had flipped the wrong switch. I went to bed. The next afternoon, I came home from college before anyone else. The house was empty. I unlocked the front door. The living room lamp was on. That made me stop. My father was careful about lights. My mother was even worse. Nobody left that lamp on during the day. I walked through the house. Empty, I switched the lamp off. When Mom came home, I told her about both incidents. She barely reacted. The electrical system is old. I said the switch physically had to move. Switches fail. Then why does it turn on? Because it's failing. That did not make sense to me. But Mom did not want to discuss ghosts. She had known Elaine personally. I think the idea bothered her in a different way than it bothered the rest of us. If a random dead stranger haunted the house, that was one thing. If Elaine was still there, then Mom had to think about someone she had watched die. She preferred bad wiring. My father was less dismissive. When I told him, he nodded slowly. Then he said, "That radio has done the same damn thing." I asked what he meant. He reminded me of the battery radio. It had turned itself on twice more. Both times, Dad had personally turned it off first. The second time, he removed the batteries. The following morning, the radio was still off. But the tuning dial had moved. Dad always kept it set to a local rock station around 94 on FM. The dial had been turned all the way down near the bottom of the AM band. He said he had never changed the band. I asked why he had not told us. Because it's a radio. That was Dad. If something could possibly have a mechanical explanation, he did not want to make it mysterious. A few weeks later, he finally checked the attic properly. Rachel's reaction to the footsteps had stayed in my mind, and I kept hearing occasional movement above my bedroom after midnight, never as heavy as that first afternoon. Sometimes, one board creaked. Sometimes, I heard a short scrape. Once I woke to what sounded like 3 steps directly above the bed. Dad took a flashlight and a respirator mask upstairs. I followed. The attic smelled like old timber, insulation, cardboard, and dust. We found evidence that squirrels had been there in the past, but nothing recent. No fresh droppings, no nest, no chewed boxes. Dad checked the tiny windows. Both were closed. He looked along the roof edges for holes. Nothing obvious. Then he showed me why the sound might have seemed louder than it was. The floorboards above my room were older than the rest. Several were slightly loose. If you stepped on one near the center, it produced a deep creak that carried through the ceiling below. Dad pressed it with his boot. The sound was similar, not identical, similar enough that I felt relieved. "There you go," he said. "Still needs something stepping on it. Animals, where are they?" "They don't leave forwarding addresses." I laughed. We began walking toward the front attic window. That was when the static started. It was faint. Dad stopped. "You hear that?" Yeah, it sounded exactly like the noise Rachel and I had heard while napping. Radio tuning. A low wash of static shifting through different frequencies. Dad looked around. There was no radio operating. Then we noticed an old wooden cabinet under a sheet near the front wall. I had seen it before, but never looked closely. Dad pulled the sheet away. Underneath was an old shortwave radio receiver, not portable. A large wooden unit with a glass tuning scale and several heavy knobs. It looked like something from the 50s or 60s. The power cord had been cut, not unplugged. Cut. Only about 6 inches of brittle cable remained at the back. The static continued. Dad stared at the radio. I stared at him. He leaned closer. The sound stopped. Neither of us touched the knobs. Dad lifted the cabinet and looked behind it. No batteries, no hidden device. Nothing. He tapped the wood. Silence could have been something outside, he said. Sounded like that. I know what it sounded like. That was all. We left the radio where it was. Later, I asked my mother whether it belonged to Elaine. She remembered it. Apparently, Elaine had liked listening to distant stations at night when she was younger. Robert had bought her the radio at a yard sale because it reminded her of one her father owned. That information made the attic incident feel more personal. I told Rachel. She did not like it. So we wake up to radio noise above your room, and there's her radio sitting up there? It doesn't work. That's worse. I reminded her that old houses carry sound. Maybe someone outside had a radio. Maybe electrical interference traveled through something. She asked why it came directly from a radio with the cord cut off. I said we did not know that it did. She replied, "You literally stood beside it." We stopped discussing it. For several months, the house went quiet again. That was how it behaved. Long, normal periods followed by clusters of strange events. I finished another semester. Rachel and I stayed together. Anna got older. My parents talked about replacing the wiring, but never wanted to spend the money. Then our dog, Max, died. Max was a black Labrador mix my family had owned since I was 8. He was old by then. His hips were bad. His hearing had gone. For the final year of his life, he spent most of his time sleeping in the living room or beside my father's workbench in the garage. He died at the veterinary clinic after his kidneys failed. That loss hit me harder than I expected. Max had been part of every version of home I remembered. He had lived in our old house. He had moved into this one with us. When Elaine's house felt strange, Max made it feel normal. After he died, the building seemed too quiet. A week later, I heard claws on the kitchen floor. I was in the living room. Click, click, click. The sound moved from the back door toward the water bowl we had not yet removed. I stood. Nothing was there. I followed the sound anyway. It stopped beside the bowl. I cried. I did not tell anyone. For months after that, when I heard movement in the house, part of me hoped it was Max. That created a strange problem. Before, unexplained sounds frightened me. After Max died, sometimes I wanted them. I would hear something in the hallway and think of him. I would feel the mattress shift near my feet and remember how Max used to lean against the bed. That made it easier to dismiss other things I probably should not have dismissed. One night I woke to movement in the attic. Slow footsteps. I lay listening. Instead of fear, I whispered Max. The footsteps stopped. Then the radio static began. I never called his name in that house again. Rachel noticed changes, too. She spent the night less often. When she did, she insisted my bedroom door stay closed. If we heard anything above us, we ignored it. Then one evening, she saw something I had never seen. We were coming upstairs from the kitchen. I was ahead of her. The bedroom hallway was dark, except for light from my room. Rachel stopped. Her hand grabbed the back of my shirt. What? She pointed toward the attic stairs. The door at the end of the hall was open. I had left it closed. At the top of the narrow attic staircase stood someone. I could not see a person. I saw darkness. Rachel saw more. She later described an older woman standing sideways at the top. Not pale, not transparent, not dressed in a white nightgown. She wore a dark green cardigan over a plain skirt. Her gray hair was cut short. She had glasses. Rachel said the glasses were what frightened her. Both lenses reflected moving gray static. Not our hallway light, not the room, television like snow. The woman's face itself looked normal. She was staring downward. Rachel whispered, "There's someone there." I looked harder. The top of the stairs appeared empty to me. Rachel started backing away. The attic door slowly closed. No one touched it. We went downstairs. She refused to stay. I drove her home. In the car, she described the woman. The green cardigan bothered me. I remembered Elaine wearing dark green, not one exact sweater, just the color. She liked forest green. But the glasses were worse. Elaine had worn thick glasses for as long as I knew her. I did not tell Rachel that until she finished describing everything. When I did, she became angry. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Tell you what?" "That she wore glasses. Why would I?" "Because I just saw her." "You saw someone. Who else is standing in your attic?" I had no answer. The next day, I asked my mother for an old photograph of Elaine. She had several from barbecues and Christmas gatherings. I showed one to Rachel without saying which person was Elaine. Rachel pointed to her immediately. "That's the woman." In the photograph, Elaine was probably in her late 50s. Short gray hair, square glasses, green cardigan. Rachel started crying. Not hard, just shocked tears. She said she did not want to come to the house anymore. For almost 2 months, she didn't. That was the first time I seriously believed Elaine might still be there. The belief did not comfort me. People always ask why a ghost of someone you knew would be frightening. Because dead people should stay dead. Knowing the person's name does not make it easier when something walks above your ceiling after midnight. If anything, it makes it worse. Now, the footsteps belong to someone. The static belonged to someone. The lights belonged to someone. Or at least I thought they might. My mother finally admitted she had experienced things too. She had never seen Elaine. But she had woken several times to the bedroom light being on. My parents' switch was beside the door, too far from the bed to touch accidentally. Mom also said the kitchen radio sometimes changed stations while she cooked. She blamed poor reception. Then one afternoon, she heard the attic door open while she was home alone. She walked upstairs. The door was closed. Mom did not investigate. She went outside and waited for Dad. I asked why she continued blaming the wiring. She said, "Because I don't want it to be Elaine." "Why?" My mother looked uncomfortable. She didn't want to sell this house. That was the first I had heard that. Apparently, Robert and Elaine had argued about selling years before her death. The house was too big. The stairs were becoming difficult for her. Robert wanted a bungalow. Elaine refused. She said she would rather die than leave. After she became sick, Robert started discussing moving again. She became upset. Then her health worsened and the question became irrelevant. My mother said Elaine loved the property in a way that seemed excessive. The trees, the kitchen, the attic, everything. "Maybe she's angry we live here," I said. Mom immediately shook her head. "She liked you." That brought back my guilt. I thought about the hospital visits I had refused. I told Mom. She seemed surprised I remembered. "Elaine didn't care about that. You don't know. She asked about you." That hurt. My mother explained that during one hospital visit, Elaine had asked how I was doing in school. She asked whether I still liked taking electronics apart. She even told Mom about the old shortwave radio in the attic. She said you could have it if you wanted. I stared at her. Why didn't you tell me? You were 15. You barely wanted to visit her. That sentence landed harder than Mom intended. The radio noise changed after that. Or maybe my attention changed. I started hearing it more often, usually late at night. Never full volume, just enough static to wake me. Sometimes it came from above, sometimes from the walls. Once I heard it from inside my closet. I opened the door. Nothing. I began sleeping with headphones. That did not help. One night, while listening to music through my phone, static broke through the song. Not normal interference. The same tuning noise. A faint voice almost emerged. I ripped the headphones off. The music continued normally through them on the bed. I stopped wearing headphones at night. My father decided we needed another electrician. A man named Gary spent almost an entire day inspecting switches and junction boxes. He did find problems. Old connections. Improper grounding. A cracked switch. Enough real electrical issues to make Mom feel vindicated. Gary repaired several things. For nearly 3 months, no lights turned on by themselves. Then one night, the living room lamp came on while Dad and I were standing beside it. The switch was off. Dad stared. The bulb remained lit. He flipped the switch up. Nothing changed. Down, still lit. He unplugged the lamp. It went out. Dad held the disconnected plug in his hand. Neither of us spoke. After maybe 5 seconds, the battery radio on the shelf behind us turned on. Static, Dad swore. He walked over. The radio was already switched to off. The physical knob pointed it off. Static continued. Dad pulled the battery cover off. There were no batteries inside. He had removed them months earlier. The static stopped. Dad put the radio in the garbage the next morning. That was the first time I saw genuine fear in him. He did not discuss it afterward. The house grew quieter again. Rachel eventually started visiting. She would not go into the attic. Neither would I unless someone else was home. Then came the winter, when everything got worse. I was 21. A heavy snowstorm had trapped us indoors for most of a weekend. Rachel stayed over because the roads were dangerous. Saturday night, around 1, we heard footsteps in the attic. Not squirrels, not random creaks. Someone walked from the front of the attic to the back, stopped above my room, then turned around. Rachel looked at me. Don't say squirrels. I wasn't going to. The footsteps moved toward the attic staircase, then stopped. A moment later, the attic door opened. We heard the latch. Rachel got out of bed. Lock your door. I locked it. We stood listening. Something descended the attic stairs, one step at a time. The third-floor hallway creaked. Then silence. I expected footsteps outside my bedroom. Nothing. A minute passed. Then the bathroom light came on beneath the gap under my door. The main bathroom was across the hall. I could see the change in brightness. Rachel whispered, "Is anyone awake?" My parents' room was at the front of the hall. Anna had moved out for university. I called Dad. No response. I opened my phone and called his cell. It rang down the hall. Dad answered half asleep. "What? Did you turn the bathroom light on?" "No." Rachel shook her head violently, telling me not to open the door. Then the toilet flushed. Dad heard it through the phone. "What the hell?" His bedroom door opened. I heard him step into the hall. "Nobody's here," he said. I unlocked my door. Rachel followed. The bathroom light was on. The door was open. The toilet tank was filling. Dad stood in the hallway staring. Mom appeared behind him. The attic door remained open at the far end. Dad looked toward it. Then shut the bathroom light off. I'm checking upstairs. Mom told him not to. He went anyway. I followed. Rachel stayed with Mom. The attic was empty. But the old shortwave radio had moved. It used to sit against the front wall. Now it was in the center of the floor. A layer of dust covered the boards around it. Dad shone his flashlight downward. There were marks in the dust. Not footprints exactly. Long smears. Parallel, as if someone wearing socks had walked without lifting their feet properly. The marks began near the radio. They crossed the attic, then ended at the top stair. Dad crouched. "Did you do this? No, Rachel?" "No, we both knew the answer. I took photographs." The marks remained until Dad swept the floor months later. That was our second piece of physical evidence. The next day, Dad tried moving the radio. He planned to carry it to the garage. The moment he lifted it, the attic light went out. The bulb had not burned. The switch still worked later. Dad put the radio down. The light came back on. He stared at me. "Don't say anything." He left it there. The following weeks became exhausting. Lights turned on. Footsteps moved between floors. The attic static appeared almost every night. The bathroom incident repeated twice. Both times water ran by itself. Then something new started. Doors would unlock, not open. Unlock, the back deck door had a deadbolt. Mom would lock it before bed. In the morning, the deadbolt sometimes stood open. Dad changed the lock. It happened again. He installed a sliding security bar. The deadbolt still moved, but the door stayed closed. Whatever was happening seemed increasingly physical. One night, my bedroom closet opened. Another night, my desk chair moved from one side of the room to the other. Once Rachel's purse disappeared and turned up inside the attic. That caused a serious argument because she thought I had put it there as a joke. I had not. Her purse had been beside the bed. The attic door was closed. Nobody admitted moving it. Rachel cried when Dad brought it down. She stopped staying overnight again. The house began affecting my relationship with her. She wanted me to move out. I wanted to, but I was still in school and working part-time. Living with my parents saved money. I also felt strangely responsible for the house. That sounds stupid. Maybe I felt responsible for Elaine. Part of me believed my guilt over not visiting her had become connected to everything happening. I knew that was not logical. Still, grief and guilt rarely are. I started going into the attic during daylight. I talked aloud. Not constantly, just once or twice. "Elaine, if this is you, I'm sorry. Nothing happened." Another time I said, "You scared Rachel." The attic remained silent. Then, as I turned to leave, the old radio knob moved. Only slightly, a soft click. I ran downstairs. I never apologized again. The most frightening incident with Rachel happened the following spring. She had started coming back to the house during the day. One afternoon, we were alone. My parents were shopping. We decided to go upstairs to my room. Rachel was sitting on the bed while I changed clothes. Suddenly, she stared at the doorway. "What?" She raised one finger. Listen, I heard nothing at first. Then static. Very faint. Coming from the hallway. It moved closer. That sounds impossible, but I don't know another way to describe it. The sound was not simply getting louder. Its position changed, like a small radio being carried toward the room. Rachel stood. The static reached the doorway. Stopped. Then I saw something. Not the entire woman. A reflection. My closet mirror faced the bedroom entrance. In the mirror, an older woman stood behind Rachel. She wore a green cardigan. Her gray hair was short. Square glasses covered her eyes. Across both lenses moved gray static. Horizontal bands. Constant motion. The rest of her face was perfectly normal. Not decayed, not pale, just an older woman. That made it worse. I turned. The doorway was empty. In the mirror, she remained. Rachel saw my face. What? I pointed. She turned toward the mirror. The woman moved. One step closer. Rachel screamed. The figure raised her right hand. Her fingers were ordinary except for one detail. The nails were stained dark brown at the tips, like someone who had spent years handling tobacco or strong tea. Elaine had always had those stains. I remembered them. She pointed toward the ceiling. Then, the mirror cracked. One straight fracture crossed from top right to bottom left. Rachel grabbed my arm. The attic floor above us groaned. A heavy impact hit the ceiling. Then another. Dust fell. We ran downstairs. 10 seconds later, a section of attic flooring collapsed through my bedroom ceiling. Not the entire roof. 3 old boards gave way along with insulation and boxes. A heavy wooden trunk crashed onto my bed, exactly where Rachel had been sitting. If we had remained in the room, one of us could have been seriously injured. Dad inspected the damage. The boards were rotten near an old roof leak. He blamed that. He could not explain why the mirror broke before the collapse. He could not explain the woman. Rachel and I interpreted the incident differently. She believed Elaine warned us. I was not sure. What if she caused it? Why warn us then? Maybe she wanted us out. She pointed up. Exactly. Rachel became frustrated. You're determined to think she's evil. I'm not. You are. I thought about that afterward. Maybe I was afraid of accepting a kinder explanation because it would make Elaine feel more real. If she protected us, then she was still Elaine in some sense. If she was only a frightening phenomenon, I could keep emotional distance. Dad repaired the ceiling. He also replaced several attic floorboards. For a while, the attic sounds stopped. That summer, Robert visited. He was passing through town and asked if he could see the old house. My parents invited him for dinner. I had not seen him since we bought the place. He looked older. We ate in the kitchen. Afterward, he walked slowly through several rooms. He became emotional near the living room window. He said Elaine used to sit there every morning. Eventually, he asked if we still had the radio. Dad looked at me. Yeah, Robert laughed. She loved that stupid thing. I asked why it was in the attic. Robert said after Elaine became sick, she started hearing things through it at night. Stations that were not stations. He thought poor reception was confusing her. Sometimes, she claimed people were walking upstairs while the radio made static. Robert had assumed medication affected her. That made my stomach tighten. She heard footsteps in the attic? Robert nodded. All the time near the end. I asked whether anyone checked. Of course. Squirrels, Rachel, who was sitting beside me, looked across the table. Same explanation. Same attic. Same static. I asked whether Elaine had ever been afraid of the house. Robert shook his head. Never. She loved it. Then he added she was afraid someone was trying to get in. My mother asked what he meant. Robert frowned. I don't know. She checked doors in the middle of the night. Said she heard people walking. He thought illness caused it. I asked if she ever saw anyone. Robert became quiet. Once she said there was a woman upstairs. The room went still. I asked what woman. She didn't know. Did she describe her? Not really. Robert rubbed his forehead. She said the woman's glasses were wrong. Rachel gripped my leg beneath the table. What was wrong with them? Robert looked at me. She said there was snow in them. Nobody spoke. Robert noticed our faces. What? My father finally told him. Not everything. The static. The footsteps. Rachel seeing Elaine. My mirror. Robert listened without interrupting. When Dad mentioned the glasses, Robert went pale. Then he said something I still think about. Elaine didn't own a green cardigan. I stared at him. Yes, she did. No, I remembered the photograph. Mom retrieved it. Robert looked. The woman wearing green stood beside my parents at a barbecue. Robert tapped the picture. That's not Elaine. My mother took the photograph. Her face changed. The woman looked similar to Elaine. Same age, similar hair, same glasses. But Robert was right. It was not her. We had assumed. Rachel had pointed to that woman because she resembled the figure she saw. Mom flipped the photograph over. No names. Robert said the woman might have been one of Elaine's cousins. He did not recognize her. That destroyed the simple explanation. Maybe Elaine was not haunting the house. Maybe she had experienced the same thing before she died. Robert left that night, visibly shaken. Before going, he told Dad to throw the radio away. Dad did not. I asked why. He said, "I don't like being told what to do by a piece of furniture." The house became much worse after Robert's visit. The first night, footsteps crossed the attic for nearly 20 minutes. The radio static moved through every frequency. Lights switched on throughout the house. Living room, kitchen, hallway, bathroom, one after another. My parents woke. I came downstairs. Dad shut each light off. They came back on behind him. Mom started crying. Dad finally shouted, "Enough." Everything stopped. Every light went out simultaneously. The house went completely dark. Then footsteps began in the garage, below us. Slow, dragging, they moved toward the internal stairs. Dad grabbed a flashlight. I told him not to go. He ignored me. We listened. The garage door to the staircase opened. One stair creaked, then another. Something climbed from the lowest level toward the kitchen. Dad stood holding the flashlight like a weapon. The door at the top of the garage stairs opened. Nobody was there. A smell entered the kitchen. Not rot, not perfume. Hot dust. The smell old radios make when they have been running too long. Then static came from upstairs. The attic. Dad shut the garage door. No one slept. The next morning, we found muddy marks on the garage stairs. Not footprints. 2 long parallel smears. As if someone in wet socks had dragged both feet upward. The marks continued to the kitchen threshold, then stopped. Dad photographed them before cleaning. The mud was dark and oily. It did not match the dry garage floor. Outside, the ground was frozen. That became another physical piece we could not explain. My mother wanted to sell the house. Dad refused at first. He had invested years of work into it. He said we could not move because of noises. Mom replied, "It's not noises anymore." They argued for weeks. Rachel encouraged me to move in with her. We were not ready financially. But I began packing anyway. That seemed to provoke something. Objects started appearing in strange places. My shoes moved into the attic. A suitcase disappeared and turned up in the garage. Rachel's photograph vanished from my desk and was found behind the old radio. One afternoon, my car keys were inside the bathroom sink. Then my old broken cassette player appeared on my bed. The one Elaine had given me when I was 11. I had not seen it in years. I thought it was packed in a storage box. I picked it up. The plastic was dusty. I pressed play. Nothing, no batteries. I opened the battery compartment. Empty as I closed it, static came through the tiny speaker. I dropped it. A woman's voice emerged for less than a second. Not words I could understand. Then, silence. I put the cassette player in the garage. The next morning it was back on my bed. I threw it away at a public dumpster. It never returned. My guilt shifted after that. I started thinking about the last months of Elaine's life. Maybe she had been frightened too. Maybe everyone had blamed her medication. Maybe she heard the same footsteps and static while knowing nobody believed her. I felt ashamed of reducing everything to Elaine haunting us. What if she had not caused any of it? What if something had been there while she lived, and death simply made her another part of its story? That possibility scared me far more. The direct confrontation happened in November. By then, Rachel and I had decided to move into a small apartment after Christmas. My parents were discussing selling the house in spring. One Saturday afternoon, Dad asked me to help clear the attic. He had finally decided to remove everything, including the radio. We wore masks because of dust. Most boxes contained ordinary junk: old curtains, books, broken lamps, Christmas decorations. Elaine's belongings had mostly been taken by Robert years earlier. The radio sat near the front window. Dad lifted it. Nothing happened. We carried it toward the stairs. Halfway there, the attic door slammed shut below us. Dad stopped. When there are no open windows, he set the radio down. Static came from inside it, loud. The glass tuning display flickered with pale light. There was no electrical connection. Dad kicked the cabinet. The static became louder. Then someone walked up the stairs from below, one dragging step, then another. Dad stared at the closed door. I felt sick. The steps reached the other side. The handle turned. The door opened inward. Nobody was there. Then Rachel screamed from downstairs. She had arrived early without us hearing the front door. I ran toward the stairs. Dad followed. As I reached the doorway, something grabbed my sweater from behind. I stopped so violently the collar tightened around my throat. I turned. Nothing visible held me. Then the static changed. The air in front of the radio shimmered, not like heat, like the grain of an old television picture. A woman stood there, slowly becoming visible. Green cardigan, dark skirt, short gray hair, square glasses. Static moved across both lenses. She was not Elaine. I knew that immediately. Now that I saw her clearly, I could not understand how I had ever confused them. Her face was narrower, her mouth smaller. Her skin looked alive, not corpse-like, ordinary except for the glasses. She stepped toward me. Her shoes did not lift. Gray wool socks dragged across the floorboards. That was the bathroom sound. Slide, pause, slide, my sweater pulled tighter. I could not breathe properly. Dad swung a wooden broom handle. It struck something beside me, a solid impact. The grip released. I fell forward. The woman turned toward Dad. In her lenses, the static became faster. The attic radio screamed, not a voice, a high electronic feedback tone. Dad covered his ears. The woman moved toward him. I grabbed the radio cabinet. I don't know why. Maybe because it seemed connected. I shoved it sideways. The cabinet tipped. The instant it hit the floor, every sound stopped. The woman disappeared. Dad shouted for me to move. We ran for the stairs. Halfway down, the attic door slammed. It hit my shoulder. I fell. Something caught my ankle. A hand. I felt fingers through my jeans. I kicked. The grip pulled me upward. Dad grabbed both my wrists. I was hanging partly on the stairs with something dragging me toward the attic. Rachel ran up from below. She caught my belt. For several seconds, all three of us pulled. The hand tightened around my ankle. Pain shot through my leg. Then Rachel screamed. Look, the woman stood at the top stair. This time Dad saw her. I know he did. His face went white. She leaned over me. The glasses reflected static. Behind the moving gray bands, I could barely see her eyes. They were looking past me, not at me, towards something inside the attic. Her expression was terrified. She suddenly released my leg. Then she shoved me. Both hands struck my shoulders. I flew downward into Dad and Rachel. The attic door slammed. Something huge crashed onto the other side. The entire staircase shook. We crawled downward. A second impact hit the door. Wood cracked. We reached the bedroom hallway. Dad pulled the attic staircase door shut and locked it. Another impact struck from above. The lock bent. Then silence. My ankle hurt badly. 5 bruises appeared around it by evening. My sweater had torn at the collar. There were 2 deep scratches across the wooden attic door where something had struck from inside. Dad inspected them. They were fresh, the varnish curled outward. Whatever made them had come from the attic side. We did not open the door until the following afternoon. Dad brought 2 friends. One was Gary, the electrician. The other was a contractor. The attic looked like a storm had hit it. Boxes were overturned. 3 floorboards near the radio had broken. The old radio itself was smashed. The wooden cabinet had split open. Inside, behind the speaker and tuning mechanism, Gary found something strange. A bundle of photographs wrapped in cloth. They had been hidden inside the cabinet decades earlier. Most were badly faded. Several showed the house. One showed Elaine as a young woman with Robert. Another showed a family we did not recognize. Then we found the woman. Green cardigan, dark skirt, square glasses. She stood beside an older man in front of the house. On the back was written, Martha, 1968. Robert did not know who she was. The house had belonged to someone else before he and Elaine bought it. We never found out whether Martha lived there. No one we spoke to knew. We did not search online for a convenient answer. At that point, I did not want one. The photograph was enough. Dad threw the broken radio away. The attic became quiet for nearly a year. Rachel and I moved out. Life improved immediately. I stopped waking to static. Lights stayed off. No dragging footsteps. My ankle healed. The bruises lasted almost 3 weeks. Rachel kept photographs of them because she knew someday I might convince myself they had never looked like fingers. My parents remained in the house. Mom still complained about lights occasionally. Dad sometimes heard steps in the kitchen while he was in the garage. But nothing became as violent again. Max had been dead for years by then. Occasionally, Dad said he heard dog claws downstairs. That made him smile. He preferred believing some of the sounds belonged to Max. I never knew what to think. Rachel and I eventually married. We bought a house of our own. Normal place. No attic footsteps. No lights turning themselves on. No battery radios. For several years, I visited my parents without major incidents. But the feeling never left. The moment I entered that old house, I felt watched. Not constantly frightened, just observed. Especially on the bedroom floor. Sometimes I would walk past the attic staircase and hear one floorboard settle above me. I never went back up alone. My parents eventually decided to stay rather than sell. Dad loved the garage. Mom loved the backyard. They renovated the kitchen and replaced almost all the wiring. The living room lamp still came on by itself. New wiring, new switch, new lamp. Same problem. Mom stopped blaming electricity after that. She would simply shut it off. One Christmas, when Rachel and I were staying overnight, I woke around 1 in the morning. I heard dragging footsteps in the hall. Slide, pause, slide, my entire body went cold. Rachel woke too. We listened. The sound passed our guest room door, continued toward the attic stairs, then stopped. A second sound followed, light clicking. 4 quick taps. I almost laughed. Dog nails. Maybe Max. Rachel whispered, "Did you hear that?" Yeah, then the static started upstairs. I stopped smiling. We stayed in bed. Nothing else happened. Years passed. My father got older. He spent less time in the garage. One afternoon, he called me and asked if I still remembered the woman in the green cardigan. I said yes. He told me he had seen her again. Fully, he had been sitting in the living room after Mom went to bed. The television was off. The room was dark except for a lamp. The battery radio was long gone. A low static sound came from the hallway. Dad looked up. The woman stood beside the staircase. Same clothes, same glasses. She did not look at him. She looked upstairs. Then she raised one hand, not pointing, almost warning. Dad heard a loud crack. The attic. He went upstairs the next morning and found part of a roof support had split under snow weight. A contractor repaired it before the next storm. Dad believed the woman had warned him. I reminded him she had attacked us. He said, "Did she?" I thought about the attic confrontation, the way she looked past me, her terrified expression, the final shove that sent us away from whatever crashed behind the attic door. Maybe she had not been pulling me upward. Maybe something else had. Maybe she had been trying to stop it. I did not know. I still don't. My mother died several years ago. Dad stayed in the house alone. Rachel and I tried to convince him to move closer. He refused. Too much work moving. That was his excuse. I think he understood Elaine better than I ever did. Some people become attached to houses. They know every sound, every loose board, every window that sticks in winter. Home becomes part of their identity. Dad probably could not imagine living anywhere else. After Mom died, the lights became more active, at least according to him. The kitchen light would turn on around the time Mom used to wake for coffee. The hallway lights sometimes came on before Dad went upstairs. He joked that Mom had joined the staff. I told him not to joke about it. He laughed. "Why? You think your mother can't find a light switch?" That was Dad. Then he started hearing two sets of footsteps. One heavy, one dragging. He said the heavy steps reminded him of Mom. I did not like that interpretation. But nothing hurt him. For years, the house remained strange and mostly quiet. Then Dad fell in the garage. He was 72. He slipped while carrying a toolbox and injured his hip. He could not reach his phone. He lay on the concrete for nearly 40 minutes. Then the radio turned on. Not an old radio. A new battery-powered work radio I had bought him for Christmas. It was on a shelf across the garage. Full volume. Static. The neighbor heard it through the open side window. He came over to complain and found Dad on the floor. Dad required surgery, but recovered. When I visited him in the hospital, he said, "Tell Martha thanks." I stared at him. "How do you know it was her?" He shrugged. "Who else likes radios?" Elaine had liked them. Martha seemed connected to them. Maybe neither. Maybe both. Dad returned home anyway. The final incident happened last year. By then, Rachel and I lived several hours away. I visited Dad over a long weekend. He was doing well. Slower, but still independent. We spent Saturday working in the garage. That evening, we watched hockey. I slept in my old bedroom because the guest room was full of boxes. Being back in that room felt strange. The ceiling had been repaired years earlier. The mirror Rachel and I saw crack was gone. The furniture was different. Still, I knew every angle. Around 1 in the morning, I woke to static, directly above me. My eyes opened. I stayed still. The sound moved through the attic. Then stopped. Footsteps began, heavy, crossing from front to back. I whispered, "Not tonight." The steps stopped. A dragging sound followed, gray socks, slowly crossing the attic in the opposite direction. I sat up. Two different things. For years, we had treated every strange event as one presence. Elaine, Martha, Max, Mom, the house. Maybe we had been wrong. The dragging footsteps reached the attic stairs. Then I heard another set follow. Heavy steps. The attic door opened. I got out of bed. My bedroom door was closed. I locked it. That felt childish. I did it anyway. The hallway floor creaked. Something moved past my room. Then another thing followed. The sounds went toward my father's bedroom. I opened my door. The hall was empty. Dad's bedroom door was closed. I crossed the hall. Before I reached it, the living room light downstairs came on. I could see the glow rise through the staircase, then the kitchen light, then the garage light far below. One level after another. A path. I woke Dad. He was annoyed. What? Lights, he looked at me. Again? We went downstairs. The kitchen was empty. Living room empty. Garage empty. Every light was on. The new work radio in the garage sat silent. Dad switched it off anyway. I laughed nervously. You're turning off something that's already off. Good habit. We returned upstairs. Nothing else happened. The next morning, Dad asked me to help him retrieve winter blankets from the attic. I refused. He called me ridiculous. Eventually, I went because I did not want a 73-year-old man climbing those stairs alone. The attic looked normal. Bright sunlight came through the little rear window. Dust floated in the air. We found the blankets. As we turned to leave, I noticed something near the front wall. A radio. The old wooden shortwave radio. The one Dad had thrown away years earlier. Whole again. Not smashed. Not repaired. Whole, it sat exactly where it had been before the confrontation. I could not speak. Dad walked toward it. Don't. He stopped. We stared. The cord was still cut. The glass tuning scale was dusty. Then the speaker produced a tiny click. Static began. Dad whispered, Jesus. The tuning needle moved. Slowly, across the glass. No one touched it. The static changed with each movement. A voice almost appeared. Then another. Dad backed away. I did too. In the dusty glass covering the tuning scale, I saw a reflection. Not ours. An older woman stood behind us. Green cardigan, dark skirt, short gray hair. Her square glasses were filled with moving static. Beside her stood another woman. I recognized Elaine immediately, older than I remembered, thin from illness. She was looking directly at Martha, not at us. Elaine's expression was angry. Martha turned her head. The static in her glasses accelerated. Elaine lifted one hand. The radio shut off. Both reflections disappeared. Dad and I left the attic. We closed the door. He locked it. I asked whether he had seen Elaine. He said yes. That was the first time anyone in my family ever claimed to have seen her. Dad did not want to discuss it further. I left the next afternoon. Before driving away, I looked at the house. Nothing stood in any window. I almost convinced myself that the whole attic incident had been some combination of reflection, dust, memory, and fear. Then Dad called me while I was still 20 minutes from home. He sounded confused. Did you take the radio? No. It's gone. I told him not to look for it. He said he wasn't going to. That night, he sent me a photograph. The attic floor where the radio had stood was covered in dust except for a clean rectangular space. Leading away from it were two trails, one set of ordinary shoe prints, the other two long dragging marks. They crossed the attic together. Both ended at the top of the stairs. Dad still lives there. I visit several times a year. The house still makes me feel watched. Sometimes a light turns on. Sometimes he hears footsteps. The radio has never appeared again, at least not in the attic. 3 months ago, Dad called me after midnight. He asked if I still owned the broken cassette player Elaine gave me when I was 11. I reminded him that I threw it away more than 15 years ago. Dad was quiet. Then he said, "That's what I thought." I asked why. He told me he had woken because something was playing downstairs. He followed the sound to the living room. The old cassette player was sitting on the coffee table. No batteries, no cassette. It was producing radio static. Dad did not touch it. He went back upstairs and closed his bedroom door. In the morning, it was gone. I drove down that weekend. We searched the house. Nothing. On Sunday, before I left, I went into my old bedroom to make sure I had not forgotten my phone charger. The room was empty. I picked up the charger. Then I heard a quiet dragging sound above me. Slide, pause, slide. I looked at the ceiling. It stopped directly overhead. A second set of footsteps approached from farther across the attic. Heavy, normal walking. They stopped beside the first. For several seconds there was complete silence. Then something clicked on my desk. I turned. My old cassette player was sitting beside the lamp. I did not go near it. The play button pressed down by itself. Static came through the speaker. Very faintly, beneath the interference, I heard two women speaking. I could not understand the first voice. The second was clearer. It said one sentence. "He's not yours." The attic floor above me creaked. The cassette player shut off. When Dad came into the room less than a minute later, the desk was empty. But in the varnish where the player had been sitting were 4 fresh brown fingerprints, and across the glass of the lamp beside them were 2 narrow bands of gray static moving from left to right. I was 12 years old when this happened, during the first Christmas after my father died. That is important, although for years I tried to convince myself it wasn't. We lived outside Grand Rapids, Michigan, in a 2-story house my parents had bought when I was 5. It was not especially old or strange. It had been built in the late 70s, along with most of the houses in our neighborhood. The exterior was pale brown siding with dark shutters. We had a 2-car garage attached to the right side, a small covered front porch, and a backyard that ended at a wooden fence with another row of houses behind it. Inside, the front door opened into a narrow entrance hall. The formal living room was immediately to the left. We barely used that room during most of the year, but every December that was where we put the Christmas tree because it could be seen through the front window. Past the entrance hall was the staircase going upstairs. The kitchen and dining room were at the back of the house. To the right of the kitchen was a family room where we watched television. A short hall beside the family room led to the laundry room, garage, and basement door. Upstairs were 3 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms. My mother's room was at the front. My younger sister Julie had the room beside hers. Mine was at the back, overlooking the yard. The basement was unfinished except for a small work area my father had built along one wall. He had a bench down there, metal shelves, pegboards for tools, and boxes containing everything from camping equipment to Christmas decorations. Before Dad died, I never found the house frightening. Afterward, everything felt different. Not haunted, just empty in places where it had never been empty before. My father, Mark, died in January of 2002. There had been freezing rain all afternoon. Schools closed early. Roads were terrible. And the local news kept telling people to stay home unless they absolutely had to drive. I was at my friend Owen's house. We were supposed to be working on a science project. Instead, we had spent most of the afternoon playing video games. My mother called around 5 and said the roads were getting worse. She wanted me to stay at Owen's overnight because his family had invited me to. I refused. I had a stupid reason. The next morning was Saturday, and my hockey team had a practice at 8. My equipment was at home. I was convinced that missing one practice would somehow ruin my entire season. Mom told me to forget about hockey. I got angry. I complained. I said I wanted to come home. Dad had not left work yet. He worked at a warehouse on the west side of town, closer to Owen's house than ours. My mother called him. Dad said he would pick me up. He reached Owen safely. I remember seeing his headlights through the front window. I remember Owen's mother asking if we were sure we should drive. Dad smiled and said we'd take it slow. I got into his truck. We were less than 15 minutes from home when another vehicle lost control in front of us. Dad swerved. The truck went off the road. We hit a large maple tree. I survived. Dad didn't. For a long time, I remembered almost nothing between the impact and waking in the hospital. Later, pieces came back. The sound of glass, a strange yellow light, the smell of something hot from the engine, my father's hand reaching across me just before the crash, and the tree. The bark looked almost red under the emergency lights. That detail stayed in my mind. Red bark, red lights, cold rain. People told me repeatedly that my father's death was not my fault. The other driver lost control. The weather was terrible. Dad chose to come get me. I was 12. None of that mattered when I lay awake at night. If I had stayed at Owen's house, Dad would not have been on that road. That was the equation my mind understood. I wanted to come home. Dad came for me. Dad died. I never told my mother how strongly I believed that. She was grieving enough already. So, I carried it quietly. Christmas that year was difficult. Dad loved Christmas. He was annoying about it. He put lights on the roof even when it was freezing. He played the same old Christmas albums every December. He bought a real tree from the same farm each year and complained about getting sap on his hands while tying it to the car. My mother wanted to skip Christmas entirely in 2002. Julie was 9. She still believed Christmas morning was the most important event of the year, so Mom made herself decorate. But she refused to buy a real tree. She said she could not handle the smell. We bought an artificial one. It was 7 feet tall and looked reasonably realistic from a distance. Mom put it in the formal living room beside the front window, exactly where Dad always put the real tree. We used our old decorations. That was another mistake. Every ornament seemed connected to him. There was a small wooden cardinal he had painted when I was little, a brass hockey skate he bought me, a handmade angel Julie had made in kindergarten, a silver bell from my parents' first Christmas after they were married. Mom kept stopping while decorating. Once I saw her holding the silver bell in both hands. She thought I had gone into the kitchen. I quietly walked away. The tree lights were the old multicolored kind. Red, blue, green, yellow, clear. They were not programmable. They did not blink in patterns. You plug them in, and all of them came on. That matters too. Owen came over for a sleepover about a week before Christmas. We had remained friends after Dad died, although things had been uncomfortable between us at first. Owen had seen my father pick me up that night. He knew where Dad was going. I think he felt guilty in his own way because the accident had begun at his house. Neither of us ever talked about it. That is how 12-year-old boys handle grief when nobody teaches them another way. We play video games, make jokes, pretend nothing bothers us. That evening, my mother ordered pizza. Julie had a friend staying at our grandmother's house. Mom went upstairs around 11. Owen and I were allowed to sleep downstairs in the family room. We had sleeping bags on the carpet and planned to stay awake all night. Around midnight, we got bored with the PlayStation and went online. Our family computer was in a small desk area between the kitchen and family room. It was a bulky beige Dell with a cart monitor and dial-up internet. This was before every kid had a phone in his pocket. Going online still felt like an activity. We visited stupid websites, flash games, joke pages, scary story sites. At some point, Owen found a website that claimed you could communicate with a ghost through a digital spirit board. It was obviously fake. The page had a black background, a badly drawn wooden board, letters arranged in a circle, and a little white pointer that moved when you typed questions. There was probably a simple program behind it that selected random words from a list. Neither of us thought it was real. Owen typed, "Is anyone here?" The pointer moved. Yes, we laughed. I typed, "What is your name?" The pointer moved across several letters. A-L-E-N, Allen, Owen said. Maybe it can't spell. We asked how old it was. 8. Where it lived. Home, Owen asked whether it could see us. Yes, that made us laugh less. Then I asked, "How did you die?" The pointer stopped. Nothing happened for several seconds. The modem made one of those faint electronic clicks computers used to make. Then the pointer moved. T-R-E-E, tree. I stopped smiling. Owen noticed. "What?" "Nothing. It's just a program." "I know." He laughed. "Maybe Ghost Allen fell out of a tree." I stared at the word on the screen. Tree, my father's truck. The maple. Emergency lights reflecting against wet bark. I reached for the mouse. "Let's do something else." Owen looked at me. Then I think he understood. He knew how Dad died. "Sorry, it's fine." I closed the website. We played another game for a while. Neither of us mentioned it again. That should have been the end of the story. 2 kids used a fake ghost website. It produced one random word that happened to connect with something traumatic in my life. Coincidence? I still believe coincidences happen. But strange things began almost immediately. The first was the smell. We were sitting in the family room when Owen asked if my mother had bought a real tree after all. "No. Smells like pine." I noticed it then. Fresh pine. Strong, like walking into the Christmas tree lot my father used to take us to. Our artificial tree was in the living room on the opposite side of the house. It had no scent. I assumed Mom had sprayed some air freshener. We checked beneath the kitchen sink. Nothing pine scented. The smell disappeared after a few minutes. A little later, we walked into the living room because Owen wanted to look at the presents. The Christmas tree lights were on. I had watched my mother unplug them before going upstairs. She was extremely careful about Christmas lights because she was afraid of fires. I checked the plug. It was connected to the wall. "Owen." "What?" My mom unplugged these. Maybe she came back down. We had not heard her. I walked to the stairs and listened. Nothing. I unplugged the tree. The room went dark except for streetlight through the front window. Owen picked up one of the presents and shook it. I told him to stop. Then something moved inside the branches. We both froze. Not a large movement. One ornament swung, a red glass ball near the middle of the tree. It moved back and forth. No other branch moved. Owen stepped closer. "Maybe you bumped it." I didn't. He touched the ornament. It stopped. We went back to the family room. I was beginning to feel uncomfortable, but not frightened enough to wake Mom. We were 12. Admitting we were scared would have been worse than whatever the house was doing. Around 2 in the morning, we decided to sleep. Instead of sleeping in the family room, Owen suggested moving our sleeping bags into the formal living room near the tree. I don't remember why. Maybe the family room carpet felt uncomfortable. Maybe we wanted to see the snow that had begun falling outside. Whatever the reason, we carried blankets into the living room. The tree was unplugged. I checked again. The plug lay on the floor several inches from the outlet. We slept with our heads near the doorway and our feet toward the tree. I woke sometime later. The room was red. That is the first thing I remember. Not brightly red. Dimly, enough that the walls, ceiling, and furniture looked different. I opened my eyes. The Christmas tree was lit, but only the red bulbs were on. Every red bulb across all 3 strings glowed. The blue bulbs were dark, green dark, yellow dark, clear dark, red only. The plug was still lying on the floor. I could see it. I remember staring at the disconnected cord. My brain simply would not accept what I was seeing. Then I noticed someone standing in front of the tree. A boy. Small. Maybe 7 or 8 years old. He stood with his back partly toward us. He wore gray pajama bottoms and a red long-sleeved shirt. His feet were bare. His hair was light brown and cut unevenly around his ears. At first, I thought Julie had brought home some kid from Grandma's house. That made no sense, but my mind wanted a normal explanation. The boy was completely still. Owen was awake beside me. I knew because I heard his breathing change. Neither of us spoke. The boy lifted one hand. He touched a red ornament. The ornament stopped reflecting the room. Instead, its glass surface went dark around his fingers. I remember that clearly. Then he turned slightly. I saw the side of his face. He looked like an ordinary child. No dead skin, no black eyes, no blood. But the red Christmas lights did something strange when they hit him. The light did not sit on his skin. Thin red lines appeared beneath it. They started around his jaw and spread down the side of his neck in tiny branching patterns. They looked like the veins inside a leaf, or the smallest branches of a tree. The lines seemed to move deeper under his skin whenever another red bulb brightened. I felt physically sick. The boy turned farther toward us. His expression was neutral, not angry, not smiling. He looked tired. He raised one finger to his mouth, not quite a shushing gesture, more like he was touching his lips to make sure they were there. Then the Christmas lights went out. Complete darkness. I squeezed my eyes closed. That sounds ridiculous. I was 12 and terrified. I expected someone to touch me. Nothing did. I remained awake for what felt like several minutes. At some point, exhaustion won. I fell asleep. The next thing I remember was morning sunlight. Owen was sitting upright beside me. The tree was dark. Mom was in the kitchen making coffee. I had already begun convincing myself it had been a dream. Then Owen said, "Who was that kid?" I looked at him. "What?" "Last night. I felt something cold move through my stomach." "What kid?" He stared at me. "The boy by the tree." I said nothing. Owen continued. The lights were red. That was the moment the experience became something else. If I had seen it alone, I would have accepted a dream. If Owen had simply said he dreamed about a kid, maybe suggestion could explain it. But he mentioned the red lights before I did. I asked what the boy was wearing. Owen said gray pants and a red shirt. I asked what he did. He touched the ornament. I asked whether he saw his face. Kind of. What was wrong with it? Owen frowned. Nothing. Then he rubbed the side of his neck. The light looked weird. I almost threw up. We checked the tree. The plug was still disconnected. Owen picked it up. Maybe there's a battery. There wasn't. We followed the wires. Ordinary Christmas lights. Nothing hidden. Mom walked into the room. "What are you doing?" Neither of us answered. She looked at our faces. "What happened?" I told her we had both had a strange dream. I did not mention the website. I did not mention tree. I definitely did not mention Dad. Mom listened. Then she did something that bothered me. She walked to the tree and touched the red ornament the boy had touched. The glass had cracked, not shattered. A single fracture ran from the metal cap halfway down the side. Mom asked whether we had broken it. We said no. She removed the ornament and threw it away. The crack was physical. But glass ornaments crack. Temperature changes. Manufacturing defects. Kids playing near trees. Nothing supernatural about that by itself. Owen went home before lunch. As he was leaving, he asked me to come outside. We stood near his mother's car. "Don't use that website again," he said. I wasn't going to. I mean it. "Okay." He looked toward my living room window. "That wasn't your dad, right?" I had not even considered that until he said it. My chest tightened. "No, because of tree. It's not Dad." "Okay, don't say that." I said okay. I became angry with him, not because he had done anything wrong, because now the thought existed. A dead person. Tree, my father. I went back inside and spent the rest of the day avoiding the living room. Nothing happened for almost a week. Then, the lights started. Only the red ones. It always happened when the tree was supposed to be off. I would come downstairs late at night and find 3 or 4 red bulbs glowing weakly while the plug was disconnected. Sometimes the entire red portion of one string lit. Never the other colors, I told Mom. She checked the wiring. My uncle was an electrician and looked at it too. He said there was no way disconnected lights should glow. He suggested maybe I was seeing reflections from cars through the window. That sounded reasonable. So I closed the curtains. It happened again. I took a photograph with a disposable camera. When the film was developed, the tree looked dark. No red lights. I started doubting myself again. Then Julie noticed. One night she came into my room around midnight. "Why is the tree on?" I sat up. "What?" "The red lights." I ran downstairs. By the time I reached the living room, everything was dark. Julie insisted she had seen it from the stairs. That made 3 people. I still did not tell Mom the full story. Christmas morning came. We opened presents. Mom cried when Julie gave her a handmade card. I tried not to. The artificial tree looked ordinary in daylight. Then Mom handed me a small package. Inside was Dad's old pocket knife. He had carried it almost every day. She said he had planned to give it to me when I was older. I held it and felt the same terrible combination of love and guilt that every object connected to him produced. Dad had been driving because of me. Now I had his knife. I did not feel like I deserved it. That afternoon I went downstairs to the basement and put the knife inside Dad's workbench drawer. I did not want it in my room. When I turned to leave, I smelled pine. Strong, fresh. I stopped. The basement contained concrete, cardboard, metal tools, and laundry detergent. No pine. Then something moved above me. The living room floor. A small set of footsteps. I listened. 3 steps. Pause. 2 more. They stopped directly above the basement stairs. I went upstairs. The living room was empty. The tree was dark. But one ornament was swinging. The wooden cardinal Dad had painted. That one had always been my favorite. It moved slowly. Forward. Back, forward, back. I reached out and stopped it. My fingers felt sticky. I looked at them. Amber-colored resin coated my fingertips. Sap, real tree sap. I smelled it. Pine. I called Mom. She wiped the ornament with a paper towel. More sticky amber came off. "Did you put something on this?" "No," Julie denied touching it. Mom washed the ornament. The next morning it was sticky again. That was the first piece of evidence that lasted. We put the cardinal on the kitchen counter. By afternoon, more resin had formed along one edge. Mom finally threw it into a plastic bag and placed it in a cabinet. I became furious. "Don't throw it away." "I'm not. It's Dad's." "I know." "Then don't touch it." Mom stared at me. "I am allowed to touch your father's things." I knew immediately I had hurt her. I walked away. That evening, the cardinal was back on the tree. Mom found it. The plastic bag in the kitchen cabinet was empty. Nobody admitted moving it. My mother stopped trying to explain everything after that. She did not say ghost, but she watched the tree differently. The day after Christmas, she told me we were taking it down early. Normally, we left decorations up until New Year's. This time, she wanted everything boxed. I helped. As we removed ornaments, I kept watching for the cardinal. When I reached for it, Mom stopped me. "I'll do that one." She put on rubber kitchen gloves. The ornament was dry. No sap. She wrapped it in tissue paper and placed it in a separate box. Then we unplugged the lights and took the artificial tree apart. When Dad was alive, putting away Christmas was depressing in a normal way. That year, it felt like dismantling something dangerous. The tree came apart into 3 sections. Mom carried the top to the basement. I carried the middle. As I reached the bottom of the basement stairs, something moved behind the furnace. I heard a child inhale. One quick breath. I dropped the tree section. Metal branches scraped across concrete. Mom called from upstairs. "You okay?" "Yeah," I shone the basement light toward the furnace. "Nothing. We put the tree into its cardboard box." Dad had written Christmas tree on the side years earlier with a black marker. I taped the box closed. Then I put 3 heavy storage bins on top of it. That night, I slept better than I had in weeks. The red lights stopped. For almost 2 months, nothing unusual happened. Owen and I stopped talking about the boy. If we slept at each other's houses, it was always his house. I never opened the Fake Spirit website again. By February, I had mostly decided that what happened had been a shared half-awake experience combined with stress. There is a real phenomenon where people waking from sleep can hallucinate figures. I did not know the term then. I learned about it later. Maybe Owen and I had both woken because of some real light outside. Maybe one of us whispered something and influenced the other. Maybe the tree lights were reflecting car brake lights. That explanation was not perfect, but it was better than a dead child in the living room. Then Owen called me one Saturday morning. He sounded nervous. "Did you give me something?" "What?" "A Christmas ornament." "No, seriously, no. He asked me to come over." I rode my bike to his house. His mother was at work. Owen led me into his bedroom. On his desk was a red glass ornament. I knew it immediately. It was the cracked one from our Christmas tree. The one Mom had thrown away the morning after the sleepover. The fracture still ran halfway down the side. "Where did you get that?" I woke up, and it was there. "You're lying." "I'm not." "You took it." "When?" "I don't know. Your mom threw it away. I had never told him that." He looked at me. "I didn't know that." We stood staring at the ornament. Owen refused to touch it. I picked it up. The glass felt warm, not room temperature. Warm, I carried it outside and threw it into a metal trash can behind his garage. We heard it break. Then we covered the pieces with garbage. I told Owen not to tell anyone. He agreed. That should have been impossible enough. Then the next thing happened. I began hearing branches against my bedroom window. We had no tree near that side of the house. The nearest tree was in the backyard, at least 30 feet away. Still, on windy nights, I would hear a soft scratching against the glass. Scratch, pause, scratch. I would open the curtain. Nothing. Sometimes there was no wind. The first time I found something outside, I thought it was a prank. A short pine needle lay on the exterior windowsill. Dark green. Fresh, 1 needle. I opened the window and removed it. We did not have pine trees in the yard. There were pines elsewhere in the neighborhood. A bird could have carried it. Wind could have blown it. I threw it away. The next morning, there were 3. Then none for weeks. Then 7. They always appeared on the outside sill, never inside. I did not tell Mom. My mother was already having a difficult winter. January had been the anniversary of Dad's death. She started attending a grief group. I hated when she went because it meant strangers were talking about him. That made no sense. I had become possessive of grief. Dad was ours. His death was ours. I did not want other people turning him into a lesson. Mom wanted me to see a counselor. I refused. So my guilt remained untouched. The boy returned in March. This time, there was no Christmas tree. I woke around 4 in the morning because my bedroom was cold. The window was closed. My blankets had fallen partly onto the floor. I sat up. Someone stood in the hallway outside my room. Small, child-sized. I could only see part of him because the door was mostly closed. Gray pajama pants, bare feet. I froze. The feet were pointed toward my mother's room. One heel lifted, then lowered. No sound. I reached for my lamp. The moment it clicked on, the hallway was empty. I got out of bed. The carpet outside my room was dry, nothing unusual. Then I smelled pine. I walked toward Mom's room. Her door was closed. Before I reached it, she opened it. "What are you doing?" "Nothing." She looked tired. Then she sniffed. "Do you smell that?" I lied. "No." She looked down the hall. "Smells like a Christmas tree." I returned to my bedroom and closed the door. The following morning, we found Dad's wooden cardinal on the stairs. It had been packed in the basement. Mom stared at it for almost a minute. "Did you get this out?" "No, Julie?" Julie was already at school. Mom picked it up. Her fingers became sticky. Sap again. That was when she finally asked me if there was something I had not told her. We sat at the kitchen table. I told her everything. The website, Tree, the boy, the red lights, Owen seeing him, the cracked ornament at Owen's house, the pine needles. Mom did not interrupt. When I finished, she looked angry. Not at me, at the situation. Then she asked, "Why didn't you tell me about the word?" I knew exactly what she meant. "Tree, Dad." I looked down. She waited. I started crying. I had not cried properly in front of my mother since the hospital. I made him come get me. Mom's face changed. "What?" "I made Dad drive." "No, I did. You asked to come home. I wouldn't stay. You were 12. If I stayed there, he wouldn't have died." Mom stood and came around the table. I pulled away. I did not want her to hug me. I wanted punishment. That sounds strange now. At 12, I had spent more than a year secretly believing my father's death was the result of something selfish I had done. Part of me needed someone to agree. Mom didn't. She said Dad had already planned to come home. She said the road conditions, another driver, and bad luck caused the crash. I repeated that he only went to Owen's because of me. Mom said, "He was your father. Picking you up was not something you did to him." I still did not believe her. Then she told me something I had never known. Dad had called her from Owen's driveway. He said the roads were worse than expected, and he planned to stay there with me if necessary. He did not feel forced. He was not angry. He had even joked that I owed him 2 driveway shovelings for making him come out. That conversation hurt. But it also changed the memory. For more than a year, I had imagined Dad driving through the ice because I had trapped him in some obligation. Now I knew he had been making normal decisions. Still, he died. Knowing he wasn't angry did not make him alive again. Mom placed the wooden cardinal on the table. "If that thing is using your dad to scare you, don't help it." I stared at her. It was the first time she referred to whatever was happening as a thing. We put the cardinal into a metal cash box. Mom locked it. She kept the key. That was the first time I willingly gave up one of Dad's belongings. Not forever, just control over it. That night, nothing happened. Then another week passed. Then another. Spring came. The pine needles stopped appearing. The house felt normal. By summer, I started believing the haunting had ended. Owen still refused to sleep over. We remained friends, but something between us changed after that Christmas. We had shared an experience neither of us could explain. Sometimes that brings people closer. Sometimes it makes them avoid the subject because each person reminds the other that it really happened. We did the second. Then, in October, almost a year after the website, my mother brought the Christmas decorations upstairs. I became instantly anxious. She noticed. "We don't have to put the tree up," Julie protested. Mom looked at me. I said it was fine. I did not want the house changing our family traditions. That felt like giving something power. We waited until the first weekend in December. Mom brought the artificial tree box into the living room. The tape I had placed across it the year before was still there. The black marker still said Christmas tree. When I cut the tape, pine smell filled the room. Mom smelled it too. She stepped backward. The artificial branches inside were damp, not wet enough to drip, just slightly moist. Amber-colored resin had formed along several plastic needles. Mom touched one with a paper towel. Sticky. This isn't possible. That sentence frightened me. Adults are supposed to have explanations. When Mom said something was impossible, it felt as though a wall had disappeared. Julie asked what was wrong. Mom said the tree was dirty. She told us we were buying a new one. We carried the old tree outside. Dad's truck was gone, so we used Mom's car to take it to the county waste station. The employee there threw the box into a large construction dumpster. I watched it disappear beneath broken furniture and black trash bags. Mom bought a new artificial tree that afternoon. Different brand, different shape, white lights only, no red bulbs. She thought that mattered. So did I. We decorated carefully. The wooden cardinal remained locked away. Mom did not put Dad's pocket knife under the tree. We used mostly new ornaments. For several days, everything stayed normal. Then, one white light turned red. I was the first to notice. Near the bottom of the tree, one bulb glowed dark red. The bulb itself was clear. It should have been white. I unplugged the lights. The red glow remained for 3 seconds, then faded. I called Mom. She saw nothing. That night I woke to scratching at my window. I did not look. The next morning there were dozens of pine needles on the exterior sill. They were frozen into a thin layer of ice. Mom saw them. She called my uncle and asked him to check the roof and gutters for branches. He found nothing. The nearest evergreen was 2 yards away. By the middle of December, the boy was appearing more often, never fully. A bare foot around a doorway. A small shoulder near the kitchen. Once I saw the top of a child's head moving behind the couch, even though nobody was there. Every time, there was pine scent. The red branching light under his skin became the detail I feared most. I saw it clearly one evening when I went downstairs for water. The family room television was on. Mom had fallen asleep on the couch. The screen changed between commercials. For a second, the room became illuminated by a solid red advertisement. The boy stood beside Mom. He looked down at her. Red light covered his face. Those thin, branching lines appeared beneath his skin. They spread from the left side of his neck upward behind his ear, then across his cheek. They were too straight to be veins, too fine to be scars. They looked like a tree's smallest winter branches pressed inside him. He turned toward me. The red lines moved, not with his skin, under it. I dropped my glass. It shattered. Mom woke. The boy disappeared. Mom saw my face. What? I could not speak. Then she noticed the smell. Pine. The next morning, I found 4 small spots of amber resin on the carpet where the boy had stood. Mom cut one out with scissors. We put it in a plastic sandwich bag. It stayed sticky for months. That became another piece of evidence. Not proof of a ghost. Proof only that something resembling fresh tree sap had appeared on a synthetic carpet in a house with no real Christmas tree. My uncle thought maybe it came from an old decoration. We had bought new decorations. He had no explanation after that. Owen came over again 2 days before Christmas. It was the first time he had spent more than an hour inside the house since the original sleepover. I did not ask him to stay. He came because his family was going through problems, and he wanted to get out of his house for a while. His parents were separating. That made him angrier than usual. We were both 13 by then, older enough to think we were not children, young enough to still be children. We played video games, ate pizza, avoided the living room. Around 10, Owen finally asked whether I still saw the boy. Sometimes he nodded. Me too. I stared at him. What? Not at my house. Then where? In dreams. I felt cold. He immediately added, probably because I think about it. I asked what happened in the dreams. He did not want to say. I pushed. Finally, he said the boy stood under a tree. Not a Christmas tree, a large leafless tree. Owen could never see where they were. The boy always pointed at something behind him. Owen never turned around. Why not? Because I know something is there. What? I don't know. That was the first suggestion that the boy might not be what we needed to fear. I did not like it. Later, Owen asked whether we should try the website again. I said no immediately. He agreed. Neither of us actually wanted to. Around midnight, Mom told us to keep the noise down. She went upstairs. Julie was asleep at a cousin's house. Owen and I remained in the family room. We had no plans to sleep beside the tree this time. At 1 in the morning, the computer turned on. The old Dell tower began humming beside the kitchen. The monitor lit. We both stared. I had shut it down. The internet was not connected. The dial-up phone cable had been removed because Mom needed the phone line. The computer finished starting. A browser window opened. The Fake Spirit website appeared. I had deleted the bookmark a year earlier. I had cleared the browser history. I did not know the website address. Owen walked toward the computer. I grabbed his arm. Don't. The pointer on the digital board began moving. No one had typed a question. It spelled tree, then stopped. A second word began. Under, tree under. Then the browser froze. The monitor went black. Owen whispered, "What does that mean?" I told him I did not know. The Christmas tree lights came on. All white for 1 second. Then every bulb turned red. The room filled with dark red light. The boy stood behind the tree. Not in front of it this time. I could see him through gaps in the branches. He was facing us. The red lines under his skin were brighter. His eyes looked normal. Brown, afraid, that surprised me. He looked terrified. The boy lifted one hand. He pointed downward, at the floor beneath the Christmas tree. Owen whispered, "Under." The boy nodded. Then something hit the basement ceiling below us. One enormous impact. The tree jumped. Several ornaments fell. Mom shouted from upstairs. What was that? The red lights went dark. The boy disappeared. I ran to the basement door. Owen followed. Mom came downstairs in her robe. I told her something had hit below the living room. She told us to stay upstairs. She took a flashlight. I refused to let her go alone. The three of us went down. The basement smelled strongly of pine. Dad's old workbench stood along the wall. Storage shelves lined the opposite side. Directly beneath the living room tree was an unfinished section of ceiling. Nothing had fallen. No pipe had burst. No animal. Then Owen pointed. One of the ceiling joists was wet. Amber liquid had collected along the wood. A single drop fell. Sap. Mom touched it. Sticky, the joist was ordinary framing lumber, dry for 20 years. There was no pine tree inside it. Mom said we were leaving. We spent the rest of the night at my grandmother's house. The next morning, my uncle came over. He inspected the basement. He found no water leak, no resin containers, no structural issue. The sticky substance remained. He scraped some from the joist. He smelled it. Pine. Mom asked how pine sap could come out of old framing lumber. He had no answer. The following afternoon, my uncle removed a small section of drywall from the living room wall behind the Christmas tree. He thought maybe some old wood treatment or adhesive had leaked. Nothing. Then he noticed a rectangular patch in the subfloor near the front window. It could only be seen from the basement. A piece of plywood, about 2 feet by 3 feet, had been fitted between joists during an old repair. Different wood, different nails. My mother had never known about it. Uncle removed the screws. Behind the plywood was a shallow cavity beneath the living room floor. Inside were several old objects: a child's red mitten, 3 rusted Christmas light bulbs, a small metal toy truck, and a folded newspaper. Nothing supernatural, just old junk. My uncle assumed children had hidden things there decades earlier. The newspaper was from December 1974. We did not find an article explaining anything. No dead child, no accident in our house, no convenient answer. Mom threw the newspaper away. She kept the toy truck because she thought it might belong to a previous owner's child. I hated the red mitten. One fingertip was dark with hardened resin. We placed everything in a cardboard box. The cavity itself was empty. My uncle sealed it again. That night, the boy stood beside my bed. I woke and saw him, fully, closer than ever. He was maybe 8. His red shirt looked old-fashioned now that I could see it properly. Thin cotton, 3 buttons at the neck. Gray pajama pants too short at the ankles. His bare feet were dirty with dark soil. The red lines beneath his skin were visible even though no red light was in the room. They began at his throat, branching upward, downward, across his collarbone. He held something, my father's wooden cardinal. The ornament had been locked inside Mom's metal cash box. The boy extended it toward me. I did not take it. He looked at the ornament, then at me. His lips moved. No sound came out. He touched his throat. The branching red lines brightened. Then he pointed toward my bedroom door. The hallway beyond it was dark. I heard something moving downstairs. Not child footsteps. A dragging weight, slow, heavy, across the living room floor. The boy looked afraid. I got out of bed. He backed away from me. I whispered, "Who are you?" "Nothing," I asked. "Did you die by a tree?" His expression changed. Not agreement. Confusion, then he shook his head. That destroyed the only explanation Owen and I had created. The website had answered tree. We had assumed that described the boy's death. Maybe it did not. The dragging sound downstairs stopped. The boy turned toward the hallway. His face tightened. Then he disappeared. Not faded. Gone, the wooden cardinal dropped onto the carpet. I heard my mother scream downstairs. I ran. She was in the living room. The Christmas tree had moved. The entire tree. It had originally stood beside the window. Now it was nearly 3 feet forward. The metal stand had gouged 4 lines into the hardwood. The lights were unplugged. All of them glowed red. Mom was standing near the stairs. "What happened?" She pointed. Something was behind the tree. I could not see it. But the branches moved outward slowly, as though someone large was pushing through them from the wall side. The tree leaned. I pulled Mom back. The red lights went out. The branches stopped. We left the house again. For the next week, we stayed with Grandma. Mom wanted to sell. I begged her not to. I don't know why. That house was where Dad had lived. His workbench, his coffee mug, the pencil marks measuring our heights inside the pantry door. Moving felt like losing him again. That was when I realized the haunting and my grief had become connected in a way I had not noticed. I was willing to stay somewhere frightening because leaving felt disloyal to Dad. That was not healthy. Mom understood immediately. She did not lecture me. She only said, "Your dad isn't the house." Almost the same thing she had told me about his belongings. Dad was not the knife, not the cardinal, not the workbench, not the tree, not the place where he had slept. Loving someone did not mean turning every object they touched into a responsibility. We returned home after New Year's. The Christmas tree was gone. Mom had asked my uncle to remove it. He threw it away. The gouges from the metal stand remained in the living room floor. 4 deep, parallel scratches. You could catch a fingernail in them. Physical evidence. Anybody could see them. My uncle had photographs. Mom kept the bag of resin from the carpet. She also kept pictures of the sap on the basement joist. We were no longer pretending nothing happened. But the worst incident had not happened yet. It came 3 weeks later. Owen was at my house after school. We were working on an actual school project this time. Mom and Julie had gone grocery shopping. Snow had been falling most of the afternoon. By 5, it was already dark. Owen and I were in the family room. The computer was off. No Christmas decorations remained. We heard static. Both of us stopped talking. It came from upstairs, my bedroom. Owen looked at me. No, I agreed. We stayed downstairs. The static became louder, then stopped. A few seconds later, something fell upstairs. One hard impact. I told Owen we should go outside. We reached the front hall. The door would not open. The deadbolt turned. The knob turned. The door remained fixed. I tried again. Nothing. Owen ran to the back door. Also stuck. The garage entrance opened, but the garage door itself would not lift. The automatic opener clicked and stopped. I tried the manual release. Nothing. We were trapped. That was when the pine smell filled the house. Overwhelming, not fresh and pleasant anymore, sharp, hot like sap burning. The lights dimmed. Then red light appeared upstairs. Not from a Christmas tree, from my bedroom. The hallway ceiling turned red. Owen whispered, "He's here." A small figure appeared at the top of the stairs. The boy. He was looking behind him, not at us. He ran down. That was the first time I saw him move quickly. His bare feet hit the steps. No sound. He reached the bottom, stopped beside me. The red lines beneath his skin were bright enough to show through the collar of his shirt. He grabbed my wrist. His hand was freezing. Physical, real pressure. I screamed and pulled away. He held tighter. Owen tried to separate his fingers. Owen's hands passed through the boy's arm. Mine couldn't. The boy pulled me toward the living room. I fought. Let go. He shook his head. He pointed. The floor scratches where the Christmas tree had stood were dark. Something thick was pushing upward between the boards. Amber resin. It filled the grooves. Then spread. The hardwood creaked. A section near the wall rose slightly. Owen backed away. "What is that?" The boy pulled me harder. Toward it. I thought he was trying to drag me into danger. I hit him. My fist passed through his shoulder with a shock of cold so intense my fingers went numb. The boy did not react. He kept pulling. Then I realized he wasn't pulling me toward the warped boards. He was pulling me past them, toward the kitchen, away from the living room. Something beneath the floor slammed upward. The boards cracked. A dark shape pushed into the room. Not a person, not clearly anything. For less than a second, I saw a surface like wet bark pressed between the broken boards. Then it dropped. The floor settled. Owen yelled. The boy dragged me into the kitchen. This time I went with him. Behind us, the living room floor split. One board snapped upward. A sound like a tree trunk twisting filled the house. The boy released my wrist. He pointed toward the basement door. I shook my head. "No," he pointed again. The basement. The place beneath the old tree location. Owen said, "We can't go down there." Another impact hit the living room floor. The front window cracked. We had no better option. I opened the basement door. The boy disappeared. Owen and I ran downstairs. The basement lights would not turn on. We used the flashlight from Dad's workbench. The smell of pine was stronger below. We reached the patched section beneath the living room. The plywood my uncle had installed over the cavity was bulging downward. Something pressed against it from above. One screw pulled loose, then another. Owen backed away. I grabbed a hammer. Why? I don't know. The plywood dropped. Not completely. One side swung down. Inside the cavity was darkness. Too dark for the shallow space. The flashlight beam should have hit the subfloor immediately. Instead, it disappeared upward. I remember that clearly. The cavity seemed deeper than the floor allowed. Inside it, red lights appeared, tiny, dozens, Christmas lights suspended in darkness. One by one, they illuminated, red only. Then I saw the boy, standing inside, not physically possible. The cavity was less than a foot deep, yet he appeared several feet away. He looked at me, then pointed behind himself. Something enormous moved beyond the red lights. Branches, at least that is what my brain called them, black limbs crossing behind him. Not a tree exactly. They moved too independently. One struck the opening. The plywood panel broke. A long, dark form came through. It wrapped around my ankle. Hard, rough, I fell. The flashlight rolled. Owen grabbed me. The thing around my leg tightened. It felt like bark covered in thin wire. I kicked. A second branch, like length, pushed through the opening. It wrapped around the workbench leg and bent the metal support. Owen pulled me backward. My jeans tore. The thing dragged me toward the wall. I screamed. The boy appeared beside the opening. He reached toward me. I grabbed his hand. This time, Owen could see the contact. The boy's fingers closed around mine. Those red branching lines spread from his wrist into his hand. Then onto me. Thin red marks appeared beneath the skin of my fingers. Pain shot up my arm. I tried to let go. The boy wouldn't. He pulled. Not toward the hole. Away, Owen pulled too. For several seconds, all three of us were fighting whatever had my ankle. Then, my foot came free. The dark branch snapped backward into the cavity. The plywood slammed against the ceiling. The red lights vanished. The basement became silent. I could not stand. My ankle was bleeding. My jeans were torn from calf to heel. Owen had scratches across both hands. The boy remained beside me. He looked at my wrist. The red marks beneath my skin were fading. Then he placed something in my palm. Dad's wooden cardinal. Again, he closed my fingers around it. Then touched his own chest. I asked, "Is this what you want?" He shook his head. I looked at the ornament. "Is this about my dad?" Another shake. I felt angry. "What do you want?" The boy looked toward the broken cavity. Then back at me. He touched his throat. The red branching lines brightened. For the first time, he made a sound. Not a word. A short crackling exhale, like dry twigs bending. Then he disappeared. The basement door upstairs opened. Mom was shouting my name. The front door had apparently opened normally when she returned. She found Owen and me on the basement floor. My ankle was badly bruised. There were 3 deep cuts along the outside of my calf. My jeans were torn. The metal leg of Dad's workbench was bent several inches sideways. The plywood patch had cracked. And around my right wrist were 5 narrow red lines branching beneath the skin. Mom took me to urgent care. The doctor thought the wrist marks were pressure bruising. He could not explain the pattern. They remained for 4 days. The cuts on my leg took weeks to heal. The workbench stayed bent. My uncle inspected it. He said someone would have needed a sledgehammer or a vehicle to bend steel like that. There was no impact mark. That became our strongest physical evidence. Owen's parents saw his scratches. Mom showed them the broken floor patch. Nobody had a good explanation. We moved out 2 months later. Mom did not wait for summer. She found a smaller rental house across town. We packed quickly. I struggled with leaving Dad's things. The workbench stayed, So did several tools. Mom let me choose a few objects to keep. I took his pocket knife, one hockey puck he kept on a shelf, and the wooden cardinal. Before leaving, I stood in the empty living room. The 4 scratches from the Christmas tree stand were still in the floor. Sunlight came through the front window. No red lights, no pine smell, nothing. I placed the cardinal on the windowsill. Mom had told me I could keep it. I changed my mind. Dad was not the ornament. Leaving it did not mean leaving him. I walked outside. That was the last time I saw the boy in that house. For years, I tried to make the experience ordinary. Shared dreams happen. Children influence each other. Old houses make noises. Electrical problems happen. Resin can come from wood. Floorboards break. Memory changes. People under stress see patterns where none exist. I still believe all of those things. But I also know Owen saw the same boy before either of us described him. He saw the red lights. He knew the clothes. He saw the strange lines under the boy's neck. He received the cracked ornament at his house. He was with me when the floor opened. His hands were scratched. My leg was injured. The workbench was bent. Those were not dreams. Owen and I remained friends through high school. We rarely discussed it. When we were 17, I finally asked what he thought the boy had been. He said, I think he was stuck there. Why? Because he looked more scared than us. I had noticed that too. I asked what he thought tree meant. Owen did not answer immediately. Then he said, maybe we asked the wrong question. That stayed with me. How did you die? Tree, we had assumed the website was describing the boy. Maybe it was not. Maybe the boy had been trying to answer something else. Maybe the program was random. Maybe nothing about the website mattered, and it only made us pay attention. There was no way to know. Years passed. Mom eventually bought another house. Julie grew up. I moved away for college. Owen got married. I stopped thinking about the boy every day. The guilt over Dad changed too. It never disappeared completely. But I finally accepted something my mother had been telling me since I was 12. Dad made his own decision that night. He loved me. Coming to get me was something a father did because he loved his kid. Turning that love into a lifelong punishment was not honoring him. I still wish I had stayed at Owen's house. I always will. But I no longer believe I killed my father. That was the one good thing to come out of those years. Then, when I was 28, my mother called me. The old house was for sale again. She had found the listing online. I don't know why she looked. Curiosity, probably. The owners after us had lived there for more than a decade. They had remodeled everything. New kitchen, new floors, new windows. The formal living room looked completely different. I scrolled through the photographs. Nothing strange. Then I reached the basement. Dad's workbench was gone. The ceiling had been finished with drywall. The patch beneath the living room was no longer visible. I almost closed the listing. Then I noticed one picture showing the living room during Christmas. The current owners had a tree in the same place ours used to stand. Real tree. White lights. Presents underneath. I enlarged the image. One bulb near the bottom looked red, probably just reflection. Then another, and another. I stopped counting. Every light on the tree was white except 7 red points clustered near the lower branches. I could not see a boy. I sent the photo to Owen. He called me immediately. Did you zoom in behind the tree? I had not. I enlarged the shadow between the tree and the front curtain. Something small and gray was visible near the floor. Maybe part of a gift. Maybe a decoration. The resolution was terrible. Owen asked whether we should contact the owners. I said absolutely not. What would we tell them? A ghost website said tree when we were 12. A boy appeared in our living room. Something lived under their floor. We left it alone. The house sold. More years passed. I became a father. My son, Ethan, was born when I was 33. That changed the story again. When Ethan was 7, I looked at him one morning and realized he was roughly the age of the boy. That disturbed me more than I expected. The figure had always existed in my memory as a creepy child. Seeing my own son at the same age forced me to understand how small he had actually been. 8 years old, maybe younger, a kid. Whatever happened in that house, I stopped thinking of the boy as the dangerous part. Then came the final thing. It happened last Christmas. Owen and his family visited us for dinner. We had not spent Christmas together in years. Our children played downstairs. My wife and Owen's wife talked in the kitchen. Owen and I eventually found ourselves standing beside our Christmas tree. We both realized it at the same time. He smiled uncomfortably. Still use white lights? Always, he laughed. We had never told our spouses the full story. Not because we were ashamed, because saying it aloud as adults sounded insane. After dinner, Owen's family went home. My wife put our son to bed. I stayed downstairs cleaning. Around midnight, I turned off the Christmas tree. I physically unplugged it. I checked because of the memory. Then I went upstairs. At 2:14 in the morning, I woke because Ethan was standing beside our bed. Dad, I sat up. What? There's a boy downstairs. My entire body went cold. My wife woke. What boy? Ethan looked confused. The boy by the tree. I got out of bed so fast I hit my knee on the nightstand. My wife asked what was happening. I told Ethan to stay with her. Then I went downstairs. Every light in the house was off. The living room was dark. Our Christmas tree stood beside the front window. The plug lay on the floor. One red light glowed near the bottom. We did not own red Christmas lights. Ours were warm white. I stayed in the doorway. The red point went out. Then another appeared higher in the tree. Then another. 7 red lights. Same cluster as the real estate photograph. Pine smell filled the room. Our tree was artificial. I heard a soft movement beside the couch. I turned. Nobody. Then something touched the hardwood. A bare foot. 1 step. No second step. I turned on the ceiling light. Empty room. I woke my wife fully and told her more than I had ever told her before. Not everything. Enough, she thought Ethan had probably heard us talking with Owen. I reminded her we had not discussed the story. She said kids imagine things. I agreed. I wanted her to be right. In the morning, Ethan was eating cereal when I asked what he had seen. I did not describe the boy. I only asked him to tell me. A kid. What kind of kid? Little. What was he wearing? Ethan shrugged. Red shirt. Gray pants. My wife stopped moving. I asked where he stood. By the tree. Did he say anything? No. What did he do? Ethan touched the side of his own neck. He had red lines here. I sat down. My wife stared at me. Ethan continued eating. I asked whether the boy seemed scary. He thought about it. No, then why did you wake me? Ethan looked genuinely confused by the question. Because of the other one. My mouth went dry. What other one? The tree man. My wife said his name sharply. Ethan, he pointed toward the living room. The boy was watching him. I asked what the tree man looked like. Ethan did not know how to explain it. He said it was too tall. He said it was behind the tree, but also under the floor. He said its arms looked like when branches rubbed together. That was enough. I took the Christmas tree down that morning. My wife did not argue. We packed every decoration. I drove the artificial tree to a waste facility and watched an employee throw it into a compactor. I kept no ornaments from it. That night, nothing happened. The following morning, I found a small object on the living room windowsill. A wooden cardinal. Dad's wooden cardinal. The one I had left behind in our old house more than 20 years earlier. I recognized the uneven black paint on one wing, the tiny chip near the beak. My father's initials on the bottom. MR. I did not touch it with my bare hands. I used kitchen tongs. The wood was wet with amber resin. My wife saw it. Ethan saw it. I put it in a clear plastic container and locked it inside the garage. I called Owen. He was silent for a long time. Then he asked where the ornament was. I told him, "Don't throw it away." "Why?" "I don't know." That answer made me angry. I asked if anything had happened at his house after Christmas. He said no. Then he changed his mind. His youngest daughter had woken the previous night because someone was tapping on her bedroom window. Their bedrooms are on the second floor. I asked whether he checked outside. He had. No ladder. No branches. No footprints in the snow below the window. Only 3 pine needles stuck to the exterior glass. We agreed not to use the old website. We did not even search for it. I wanted no connection to that part of the past. The cardinal remained in my garage for 11 days. Nothing happened. On the 12th morning, the plastic container was still locked. The cardinal was gone. The lid had not been opened. There was resin inside the box where it had rested. 5 small streaks, like fingertips. I searched the garage. Nothing. Then I noticed something on the concrete floor. A line of fresh pine needles. They began beneath the locked cabinet. They crossed the garage. They ended at the interior door leading into my house. The door was closed. I opened it. The kitchen was empty. 1 pine needle lay on the tile. Then another. They continued through the dining room, into the living room. They ended at the spot where our Christmas tree had stood. The wooden cardinal was lying there. Beside it were 2 bare footprints in dark resin, child-sized, facing the front window. I called my wife. She saw them. We photographed everything before cleaning. The resin stained the hardwood. Even after scrubbing, 2 faint outlines remained. That was physical. Another person could see it. They are still there now. I stopped sleeping properly again. For several nights, I sat downstairs after everyone went to bed. Nothing happened. Then I heard the sound I had not heard since I was 13. Something heavy dragged beneath the living room floor. 1 slow movement. Then another. Our current house has a finished basement. There is no crawl space under the living room. No hidden cavity. I did not investigate that night. The next morning, I went downstairs. Directly beneath the living room is a guest bedroom. The ceiling was intact. No damage, no smell, nothing. I almost convinced myself I had imagined it. Then I noticed a thin red line around the smoke detector. I climbed onto a chair. Something sticky had seeped from the ceiling around its plastic base. Amber resin, pine sap. My wife saw it too. We called a contractor. He removed the detector, then cut a small opening around the electrical box. The joist above was dry. No leak. No wood treatment. No source for resin. He widened the opening. Something fell from the ceiling. A red glass Christmas bulb. Old, cracked, the same size and style as the ornament Owen and I had thrown away when we were 12. I knew it could not be the same one. Glass breaks. Objects do not travel between houses over decades. There are millions of red Christmas ornaments. That is what I told myself. The contractor picked it up. "That's weird," I asked. "Why?" He pointed to the top. There was no metal cap, no hook. Instead, the glass neck had been wrapped in a short length of gray cloth. The cloth looked old. The inside of the bulb contained something dark. He shook it gently, a dry rattle. I took it from him. Against my better judgment, I turned it upside down. A few tiny pieces fell into my palm. Pine needles, brown with age, and one small human tooth, a child's tooth. I dropped everything. The contractors saw it. My wife saw it. We did not call the police. Maybe we should have. I had no explanation for where the tooth came from, how long it had been inside the bulb, or how the bulb reached the ceiling cavity in a house built more than 15 years after my childhood experience. We sealed the tooth and ornament in separate bags. I put them in a safe deposit box. That was 3 months ago. Nothing has happened since. I had started believing the story was finally over. Then, last week, Owen sent me a photograph. He had found an old disposable camera while cleaning his mother's basement. The film was never developed. The date written on the camera was December 2002. Our sleepover. He had the film processed. Most pictures were useless. Blurred, dark pictures of us making stupid faces. One showed my living room at night. Neither of us remembered taking it. The Christmas tree filled most of the frame. Every bulb appeared dark except the red ones. A small boy stood in front of it. Not a blur, not a shadow. A boy. Gray pajama pants. Red shirt. Bare feet. His face was turned partly toward the camera. The red branching lines were visible beneath the skin of his neck. Owen called me immediately. I stared at the photograph on my phone for a long time. Then I noticed something neither of us remembered seeing that night. The boy was not alone. Behind the Christmas tree, almost completely hidden by the branches, a much taller figure was crouched against the wall. You can only see parts of it. One narrow section beside the window. Another between two branches, a shape like dark bark pressed into the room. One arm extends downward behind the boy. Its hand is resting on his shoulder. The boy is not looking at the camera. He is looking backward at that hand. Owen enlarged the photograph before sending it. Around the tall figure's wrist is something that should not have been there in 2002. A wooden cardinal. My father's initials are visible on the wing. M.R. Dad was still alive when he painted it. But the thing in the photograph is wearing it like a tag.